Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Hades, the God of the Underworld, Part 2. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Poseidon stood on a coral outcrop, gazing at the vast underwater kingdom of Oceanus. The currents wove through the towering coral spires like rivers in the sky, and bioluminescent fish shimmered in the deep blue expanse. Yet, despite the beauty around him, his thoughts were heavy. Hecate's words echoed in his mind. "You were too weak." His grip tightened into a fist. She was right. He hadn't even been able to defeat one Titan. Zeus had crushed him with ease, and if not for Hades' intervention, he would have been erased by Cronus' storm. His authority over the seas, which he had once thought was absolute, had proven useless. "I need to be stronger." Just then, a gentle voice called out. "Are you all right, Lord Poseidon?" He turned and found Amphitrite standing before him, her sea-green eyes filled with concern. The sight of her never failed to stir something deep within him. Her presence was like the calm waves of a peaceful shore, soothing yet powerful. He forced a small smile. "I'm fine, just thinking." She stepped closer, her long, flowing hair swaying in the currents. "Thinking about the war." Poseidon hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Amphitrite studied him for a moment before speaking again. "You seem troubled." Poseidon exhaled, running a hand through his hair, before clicking his tongue in frustration. "I feel useless," he admitted. "I wasn't even able to defeat a single Titan. My authority over the sea, something I've always prided myself on, wasn't enough." He clenched his fist as his eyes darkened. "I don't want to be this weak ever again." Amphitrite was silent for a moment before she reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Strength isn't just about power, Poseidon," she said softly. "You are not weak." Poseidon looked at her, his gaze searching hers. "Then why did I lose?" She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Perhaps because you don't yet understand the true nature of your domain." Poseidon frowned. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, a deep, commanding voice echoed through the waters. "If you wish to become stronger, then you must learn from the source." Poseidon turned sharply. Oceanus stood before them, his towering form radiating an aura of authority that made even the ocean tremble. His deep blue eyes locked onto Poseidon with an intensity that made the younger god's breath hitch. "Come," Oceanus said. "Let me show you what it truly means to command the seas." Poseidon's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean by that?" Oceanus folded his arms, his gaze unwavering. "I am going to train you." Poseidon blinked, momentarily stunned by the statement. "Why?" Oceanus smirked. "Because I made a deal." Poseidon stiffened. "A deal? With whom?" Instead of answering immediately, Oceanus' gaze became distant, as if recalling something. The vast throne room of Oceanus was silent, save for the gentle hum of the currents flowing through the grand pillars. Then, without warning, a cold mist crept into the chamber, swirling unnaturally through the water. Oceanus' eyes sharpened as he sat upon his throne. His presence alone was enough to make the ocean itself bow in reverence, but this mist, it carried a presence that did not belong to his domain. Then, from within the fog, a figure emerged. A woman, cloaked in shadow, her eyes gleaming with an eerie light. "Hecate." She bowed deeply. "Lord Oceanus." His expression darkened. When did gods and titans decide that they can intrude his domain whenever they want? "You dare enter my domain unannounced?" His voice rumbled like an underwater quake. "Explain yourself before I erase you from my seas." Hecate, unfazed, smiled faintly. "I come bearing a message. Someone wishes to meet with you." Before Oceanus could demand further explanation, the mist thickened. Then, as if reality itself was being rewritten, a new figure strode forward from the depths of the fog. A tall, imposing man, clad in dark robes that seemed to swallow the surrounding light. His presence carried the weight of the inevitable, the cold certainty of death itself. "Hades." His piercing gaze met Oceanus. "Shall we talk?" Hades said, his voice smooth yet unyielding. However, the ocean suddenly trembled. An overwhelming, ancient power surged from Oceanus, the sheer weight of his divinity pressing against the very fabric of the underworld god's existence. The seas roared in response, current shifting violently as if the ocean itself sought to drown out Hades' audacity. "How bold of you," Oceanus said, his deep voice carrying the authority of the primordial seas. "To enter my domain uninvited, as if you were my equal." Hades did not flinch. He merely raised a hand, and from the abyssal depths of the mist, a black throne formed behind him. Without a word, he sat, his posture relaxed but commanding. He met Oceanus' gaze with calm indifference. "I have a deal for you." Oceanus snorted. The pressure around them increased, the very water distorting under his might. "A deal? You think you can negotiate while in my waters?" The pressure intensified, threatening to crush Hades where he sat. But before it could even reach him, another force emerged. Hecate. A pulse of dark magic radiated from her as she stepped forward. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting and consuming the pressure that Oceanus exuded. The sea around them darkened, responding to her magic, swallowing the oppressive force whole. Oceanus narrowed his eyes. For a moment, silence filled the throne room as the two gods stared at each other, neither willing to yield. Then, Oceanus let out a low chuckle. Slowly, he withdrew his divinity, and in response, Hecate did the same. "I see. I underestimated Cronus' descendant." Oceanus leaned forward, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "You are far more than I expected." Hades smiled, tilting his head slightly. "Shall we talk now?" Oceanus leaned back into his throne, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "Very well. Speak." Poseidon frowned at Oceanus' lack of response. "Hey, are you listening? What do you mean you made a deal? With whom?" Oceanus merely waved a hand dismissively. "That is not your concern. You need only focus on what lies ahead. So, do you wish to get stronger or not?" Poseidon's grip on his trident tightened, his pride demanding he refuse, as he can do it himself, but before he could push further, a gentle hand rested on his arm. "Don't worry," Amphitrite said softly, her eyes full of quiet reassurance. "My grandfather won't harm you. This is a rare opportunity, one that you shouldn't waste." Poseidon hesitated, glancing at her, then at Oceanus, who stood waiting with an unreadable expression. After a moment, he exhaled and nodded. "Fine. I'll go." A small smile graced Amphitrite's lips before she stepped back, watching as Poseidon followed Oceanus deeper into the vast, endless ocean. The further they went, the darker it became. The light from the surface faded, consumed by the immense, crushing weight of the deep. The water grew colder, pressing against Poseidon's body like an unseen force trying to drag him down. Finally, they arrived at a place where even the concept of light seemed foreign. There was nothing but infinite, oppressive darkness. Poseidon glanced around, his divine senses stretched to their limits, but even then, he could barely perceive anything. "What is this place?" Poseidon asked, his voice unnaturally quiet in the abyss. Oceanus turned to face him, his expression severe. "You call yourself the god of the sea, yet you know nothing of it." He gestured to the darkness around them. "The sea is more than waves and storms, more than the creatures that dwell in its shallows. The true sea is fathomless. It is cold. It is merciless. It is," Oceanus raised a hand, "the abyss." Before Poseidon could react, the ocean god made a simple gesture, and the abyss swallowed him whole. Cold. Unfathomable, suffocating cold. Poseidon felt himself falling, the crushing weight of the deep pressing into his body, threatening to break him apart. The pressure grew unbearable, the very concept of breath stripped away, leaving only an all-consuming void. He struggled, but there was nothing to grasp onto. Nothing to fight. Just the abyss. Then, as suddenly as he had been swallowed by the abyss, Poseidon felt an unseen force yank him back. His body surged upward, breaking through the oppressive darkness, until he felt like he crashed onto solid ground, gasping for breath. He coughed violently, his hands pressing against the ocean floor beneath him as he knelt on all fours. His body trembled. No, his very soul trembled from what he had just experienced. The overwhelming weight, the unbearable silence, and the sheer nothingness of the abyss had stripped him bare. Poseidon slowly lifted his gaze. Oceanus stood before him, arms outstretched, his ancient eyes gleaming with something deep and unreadable. "This is what the sea truly is," Oceanus declared. "Not the crashing waves, not the tides that kiss the shores, not the tempests that mortals fear. The sea is the abyss. The abyss is the unknown. And all creatures instinctively fear the unknown." Poseidon swallowed, his body still shaking from the experience. Yet, beyond the fear, beyond the exhaustion, something else burned within him. Determination. Determination to be stronger. "I will teach you," Oceanus continued, his voice unwavering. "I will show you what it means to be the true overlord of the sea. The depths, the currents, the darkness, these will be a powerful weapon for you to win against anyone." He extended his hand toward Poseidon. Poseidon stared at the offered hand. He was Poseidon, god of the sea. He had thought he understood his domain, thought he had already grasped the full extent of his power. But compared to what he had just faced, he was nothing more than a fool playing in the shallows. Gritting his teeth, he reached up and grasped Oceanus' hand. "Good," Oceanus said with a knowing smile, pulling him to his feet. "Then let us begin." Underworld. Demeter let out a groan of frustration, watching as the small sprouts she had carefully planted withered and crumbled into dust. She knelt, running her fingers through the lifeless soil, only to find it dry, almost brittle, as if it rejected life itself. "This place is awful," she muttered, stomping her foot. "Not even a single blade of grass can survive here. How does my brother live in such a miserable place?" She pouted, crossing her arms. The idea of spending an eternity in the underworld, surrounded by cold stone and lifeless terrain, made her shudder. A soft, hesitant voice broke through her thoughts. Demeter turned, her golden eyes locking onto a young woman standing a few steps away. She had long, flowing green hair that shimmered like river reeds and deep emerald eyes that glowed faintly in the dim underworld light. She fidgeted slightly, shifting her weight as if unsure of herself. "Who are you?" Demeter asked, tilting her head in curiosity. The woman bowed her head slightly, her voice gentle. "I am Minth, daughter of the river god Cocytus. I serve here in the underworld." Demeter blinked. "Cocytus? The river of wailing." She looked Minth up and down, noting how different she seemed from the bleak, sorrowful waters her father represented. "And what do you want with me?" Minth hesitated before clasping her hands together, her voice barely above a whisper. I have long been fascinated by the idea of plants and flowers. We have nothing like them here. I was wondering if I could observe you while you work, if that's all right." Demeter's eyes widened. "You're interested in plants?" Minth nodded eagerly, though her expression remained shy. For a moment, Demeter simply stared at her. Then, in an instant, her frustration evaporated, replaced by unrestrained excitement. Finally, someone who understands. She grasped Minth's hands with a bright grin, squeezing them as she practically beamed. "We can water plants. Or harvest fruits. Or even talk about any hot guys. Like my dear brother Hades." Minth immediately turned red in embarrassment. "And no, I don't dare think about Lord Hades like that. Lord Hades is. Demeter looked at her with a raised brow before a wide grin broke out on her face. She doesn't need to be a goddess of love to know what Minth feels about her brother. "You like Hades?" Demeter almost laughed out loud, seeing smoke literally come out of Minth's head as her face turned as red as a tomato. I. Minth tried to say anything, but words got stuck in her throat. In the end, she can only lower her head. "Foo-foo-foo," Demeter laughed teasingly. After she had her fun, she decided to finally stop teasing the poor nymph. "All right, calm down. Let's just talk about plants. Like, did you know some plants, like orchids, mimic female wasps to lure male wasps to pollinate them?" "Really?" Minth's eyes lit up, her embarrassment moments ago completely forgotten. "Yep." Demeter nodded. "So let's start planting. There are many more interesting things about plants that I will personally teach you." Minth blinked in surprise, but before she could react, Demeter suddenly deflated, her excitement fading into a dramatic sigh. Except, she groaned, motioning to the lifeless ground, this place is completely hopeless. The soil rejects my power, the air is stagnant, and there's no sunlight. How am I supposed to grow anything? Minth looked down, biting her lip. I don't know. But. She hesitated, then looked up with hopeful determination. Maybe we can figure it out together? Demeter stared at her for a moment before breaking into a soft smile. You really mean that? Minth nodded. Demeter exhaled, brushing a stray lock of orange hair from her face. All right, fine. I guess I could use the company. Let's see if we can force some life into this wretched place. Minth's lips curled into a small, genuine smile. I would like that. And with that, the two of them knelt together before the barren soil, two unlikely allies in a realm that had never known life. The Grand Fortress of Pluto is a titanic, floating bastion of Gothic architecture, suspended in the void at the very heart of the Underworld. Built by Hades himself, it is a grim and imposing structure, eternally wreathed in ghostly mist and dimly illuminated by the eerie glow of spectral lanterns. Its foundation is forged from obsidian and soulstone, a material infused with the whispers of the dead, making the walls pulse faintly as if breathing. Towering spires adorned with sharp, menacing gargoyles pierce the oppressive sky, each one carved in the likeness of legendary beasts that once roamed the realm of the dead. The outer gates, massive and wrought from black iron, are engraved with the names of every soul that has ever passed into the Underworld, their voices murmuring in an eternal, mournful chorus. Inside, the fortress is a labyrinthine palace of endless halls, shadowed corridors, and great chambers, each echoing with the memories of the past. The throne hall, where Hades presides, is an awe-inspiring cathedral of death, its ceiling an endless night sky dotted with spectral constellations. A river of Stygian fire flows beneath the grand staircase, illuminating the throne, a towering seat carved from the bones of fallen titans, pulsing with dark power. At its highest point, the ebon spire rises above all, a lone tower from which the Lord of the Underworld can gaze upon his entire dominion. From here, he commands the passage of souls, ensuring that no spirit escapes and no god intrudes without his will. And at the heart of this castle lies a grand hall where Hestia built her hearth. At this moment, Hestia knelt before the grand hearth she had built at the heart of Hades' castle, gently stoking the flames with practiced ease. The warm glow flickered across the Gothic stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like whispers of forgotten souls. Yet, for all the bleakness that surrounded them, this place, this fire, felt like home. The Underworld had been cold and desolate when they first arrived, but since she had placed her sacred flame within these walls, something had changed. The wandering souls, once aimless and tormented, now found a strange peace in its warmth. They lingered near the castle, as if drawn by an instinctual need for comfort. Hestia didn't mind. This was her purpose, to bring warmth where there was none. Behind her, two figures sat comfortably on plush chairs near the hearth, her mother, Rhea, and the Titaness Themis. Themis, ever the picture of composed wisdom, sipped from a cup of herbal tea, while Rhea stretched out with a contented sigh, relishing the warmth of the flames. I must say, Rhea mused, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face, your hearth is truly remarkable, Hestia. I never imagined the Underworld could feel cozy. Hestia smiled, her golden eyes twinkling in the firelight. The hearth is the heart of every home. Even in the Underworld, it can make a difference. Themis hummed in agreement, setting down her tea. It is remarkable, indeed. The souls that wander these lands seem calmer, as if your fire soothes them. Hestia tilted her head. I suppose it does. Warmth isn't just physical, it's a feeling, a sense of belonging. Even the dead deserve that. Rhea reached over and affectionately patted Hestia's knee. You always were the kindest of my children. Hestia chuckled softly. You say that as if it's a bad thing. Not at all, Rhea said, shaking her head. But speaking of children, dear, have you ever considered having your own? Hestia nearly dropped the poker she was using to tend the fire. Mother. Themis chuckled behind her teacup, amused by Hestia's flustered expression. Oh, Rhea, let the girl breathe. What? Rhea shrugged, a playful twinkle in her eye. I'm simply curious. You are a beautiful young goddess, Hestia. Any god would be lucky to have you. Hestia sighed, rubbing her temples. I've already made my vow, mother. I have no interest in marriage. Rhea waved a dismissive hand. Oh, vows, schmoes. You're still young. You may change your mind one day. Hestia huffed, crossing her arms. I sincerely doubt that. Themis smirked. You know, Rhea, not every woman dreams of marriage. Hestia has found her purpose in tending the hearth and keeping the peace among the family. It is a noble calling. Hestia shot her a grateful look. Thank you, Themis. Rhea sighed dramatically. Fine, fine. But I'd still like grandchildren someday. I have to live through someone now that my days of childbearing are over. Hestia groaned. Perhaps you should ask Demeter, then. She's far more likely to settle down than I am. Oh, I intend to, Rhea said matter-of-factly. But you were here first, so you get the lecture first. Hestia rolled her eyes but smiled nonetheless. Despite her mother's teasing, it was comforting to share such light-hearted moments. They had been through so much, ongoing war, loss, exile, yet here they were, gathered around the fire, speaking of love and family as if they weren't being hunted down by Cronus. It felt normal. And in the underworld, normal was a rare and precious thing. In the dimly lit chamber of his fortress, Hades sat at the head of a long stone table, his fingers steepled in thought. Across from him sat Hera, her sharp golden eyes narrowed in concentration, and beside her, cloaked in ever-shifting shadows, was Hecate. The air was thick with tension as they discussed the next phase of their war against Cronus. We have lost the first battle, Hades began. Atlas alone nearly crushed Zeus. The four Pillar Titans are far stronger than I anticipated. So for now, our best course of action is to weaken them through calculated strikes, hit their supply lines, sabotage their strongholds, and target their commanders one by one, and retreat immediately. Hera nodded. Guerrilla tactics. It makes sense. Cronus' forces are vast, but they're not invincible. If we can starve their armies and pick them apart before they regroup, we stand a better chance when we finally face them in open battle. Contrary to popular beliefs, gods do starve. Just like mortals. The more they use their divinity, the faster they get hungry. It is because their body needed a source to replenish lost divinity, and most of the time, that source comes from foods and drinks. For powerful gods, they can directly get that source from their domain and even mortal faith. But lower gods don't have enough mortal worship to rely on faith to replenish their divinity, so they must eat. At this moment, Hecate stood up as she said her piece. Her voice was smooth yet firm. The best way to do that is by moving in the shadows. My magic can hide our forces, allowing them to strike without being detected. But we must be patient, each attack must count. We must not let Cronus and his forces react. Hera frowned, glancing around the chamber. That's assuming we even have the time. Are we truly safe here, Hades? What if Cronus decides to break through into the underworld? He has done that before when he broke through Gaia's barrier. Hecate scoffed, her lips curling into an amused smile. That is impossible. Hera arched a brow. And why is that? Hecate leaned forward, her presence exuding quiet confidence. Because Nyx is here. Hera's expression faltered slightly at the name. The primordial of the night? Hecate nodded. Not even Uranus or Gaia dared to challenge her. Cronus, for all his strength, is no different. As long as Nyx watches over the underworld, no force from the outside can invade. Although primordials cannot directly interfere in worldly affairs, invading one's domain is a completely different matter. Hades had remained silent during this exchange, his crimson eyes thoughtful. Nyx, a being far beyond even the Titans, a force as ancient as the cosmos itself. He had never met her, but the knowledge that she guarded the underworld gave him an unexpected sense of security. Maybe one day he would have the time to visit her. Still, he pushed the thought aside. There were more pressing matters to attend to. Turning to Hecate, he asked, "Have you located our remaining allies?" Hecate nodded. "I have. They are scattered but alive." "Where?" "Most of them are in Prometheus territory, the others are in hiding, while some were already captured or killed." Hera's brows furrowed. "Prometheus? Can we still trust him?" When the Titans ambushed us, he just stood there and watched.
We can.
Hecate confirmed. I have observed him for a while. But for now, he has made it appear as though he has captured our allies, hiding them under the guise of imprisonment.
They are safe, at least.
Hades nodded.
Good.
Hecate, I want you to coordinate with Prometheus and bring the other gods who are in hiding to Prometheus. Do it one by one without Cronus noticing. Be subtle. If he suspects anything, all of Prometheus' efforts will be for nothing. Hecate bowed her head.
Understood.
Hades leaned forward. And what of Cronus himself? What are his movements? Hecate's expression darkened. He is spreading his army far and wide, seeking to annihilate the remnants of the rebellion. He is not consolidating his forces but rather scattering them in pursuit of those who resist him. Hades nodded. That will be his downfall. The more he spreads his forces, the more vulnerable his supply lines become. We will exploit this. He then turned to Hecate once more. Summon the Underworld river gods. I need to speak with them. Hecate inclined her head. As you wish, my lord. With that, she dissolved into mist, vanishing from the chamber. Hades turned back to Hera, his expression unreadable. This war will not be won in a day. But if we play this right, we may just have a chance. Hera crossed her arms, her lips curving into a confident smirk. Then let's make Cronus regret underestimating us. Earth, Prometheus Temple. Prometheus sat upon his throne, humming a soft, almost cheerful tune as the golden rays of the setting sun bathed his temple in a warm glow. His fingers idly played with a bright golden apple, the smooth skin glistening in the light. He took a slow, deliberate bite, savoring the taste. It was almost amusing how the gods he had chosen to side with had just suffered a devastating loss, and yet, here he was, completely at ease. Not because he was indifferent, no, far from it. It was because he had already foreseen countless possibilities. And of all those possibilities, the Olympians always emerged victorious. And yet, his sharp, piercing eyes flickered as his thoughts wandered to him. Hades. The god he had just met for the first time in person, and that was when Cronus ambushed them in Crete. That god was not supposed to be that strong. He was not supposed to wield such power, nor was he supposed to claim the remnants of Uranus' domain. In every vision Prometheus had ever glimpsed, Hades had always been formidable but never beyond comprehension. He was always just below Zeus. He has never been more powerful than Zeus. And what's up with that spear he had hidden? It completely defies reason. Not even Cronus' scythe radiates that much power. So what had changed? He had attempted to peer into the threads of Hades' fate, to see what had altered the course of the inevitable. And that was when it happened. The moment his divine sight reached toward that particular thread, he found himself falling into an abyss unlike any he had ever encountered. An endless void, cold and silent, where time lost meaning. And within that abyss, there were eyes. Countless, grotesque, unblinking eyes, staring straight into his very being. He could not move, could not breathe, could not think. His divine essence screamed, writhing under the sheer, overwhelming weight of those gazes. It was as if something incomprehensible, was aware of his intrusion and had chosen to watch him in return. He had seen horrors beyond mortal or even divine understanding, glimpsed the wretched depths of Tartarus, and even peered into the void of chaos itself. But nothing had ever filled him with such absolute, paralyzing despair. It was as if he had become an insect, trembling beneath the gaze of an unknowable predator. Prometheus awoke from that vision gasping, his body drenched in sweat, his divine mind scarred. Even now, the memories clawed at the edges of his mind, creeping into his dreams, filling his nights with whispers and shifting, watching things. Hades was not simply a god. He was an abnormality. An anomaly. Hades is an entity whose very existence warps the natural order, distorting the flow of fate itself. Unlike ordinary mortals, gods, or even cosmic deities, he is a convergence point of destiny, where all possibilities collapse and reshape around them. He is both bound to fate and yet defies it, an impossible paradox that the universe itself cannot fully comprehend or control. He is a force that embodies the impossible coexistence of fate and free will. He is not chosen nor created, he simply exists, and by existing, he reshapes the destiny of all things. His influence cannot be predicted, controlled, or erased, for he is the beating heart of change itself. For that, Prometheus decided to give him an appropriate nickname: the First-Class Singularity. Prometheus let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head as he finished his apple and carelessly tossed the remaining core aside. For someone who could see the course of fate so clearly, it was almost exhilarating to find someone who could escape his sight. A being whose very existence warped destiny itself. Truly, he murmured to himself, what an interesting fellow. Rising to his feet, Prometheus strode toward the temple's open balcony, his sharp gaze fixed upon the horizon. 3 years. That was all the time left. 3 years before the war would reach its climax. 3 years before the ruler of the cosmos would be decided. The Firebringer smiled, the wind brushing through his hair. A storm was coming, and he would be there to witness it all. The dense forest was eerily silent, save for the frantic rustling of leaves and the hurried footsteps of a group of lesser gods fleeing through the undergrowth. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, eyes wild with terror as they darted between the thick trees, their bodies battered and bruised. "This is bad," one of them hissed, sweat dripping down his face. "How the hell did we end up running into her of all people?" "Our luck is cursed," another panted, clutching a wound on his arm. "They said she wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this battlefield." "Shut up and keep running. If we stop now, we're dead." But before they could take another step forward, she appeared. A figure stood in their path, blocking their escape. A woman, no, a beast in the shape of a woman. Half naked, her muscular, yet beautifully sculpted body gleamed with the blood of her previous victims. Long, wild crimson hair cascaded down her back, framing her strikingly sharp face. Her eyes, glowing red like molten fire, locked onto them with the cruel amusement of a predator toying with its prey. And then there were her other features. Dark, obsidian-like horns curved backward from her forehead. Large, draconic wings stretched from her back, flexing as if eager for the hunt. A long, scaled tail swayed behind her, the sharp tip dripping with fresh blood. Her clawed fingers twitched, itching for more carnage. She licked her lips, fanged teeth flashing as she took a slow, deliberate step forward. The fleeing gods froze. One of them, trembling so violently he could barely form words, whispered her name. "Seek Camp. The dragon of Hades." The instant her name was spoken, Camp's grin widened into something monstrous. "Good," she purred, her voice like silk laced with poison. "At least you know who's about to kill you." And then, she moved. A blur of red, black, and gold. Blood sprayed across the trees as her claws ripped through flesh and bone like paper. One god barely had time to scream before her tail lashed out, piercing straight through his chest. Another tried to summon his divine power, only for Camp to grab his head and crush it in her grip. The remaining gods turned to flee, only to find her already in front of them. "No, no, no," she murmured, tilting her head playfully. "You don't get to run." A flick of her claws. More screams. More blood. Within moments, the forest was silent once more. Camp stood amidst the carnage, rolling her shoulders as she exhaled in satisfaction. Ah, that was fun. As she relished the slaughter she had just committed, a woman suddenly stepped into the clearing, her expression calm yet sharp with displeasure. It was Hera, the goddess of marriage and sister of Hades. She looked around at the carnage Camp had left behind, the shredded corpses, the torn limbs, and the still warm ichor staining the forest floor. Her golden eyes settled on Camp, who stood amidst the massacre with a satisfied smirk, her crimson hair clinging to her skin from the blood that splattered across her face and body. Hera sighed. "You should have at least left one alive, Camp. We could have questioned him." Camp let out a snort, stretching her wings lazily as she gave her a smirk. "Not my problem. I'm not your soldier, and you're definitely not my boss." She rolled her shoulders, flicking the blood off her claws. "Besides, just because you act like the queen of the underworld and rule it alongside Lord Hades doesn't mean you actually are one." Hera's expression remained unreadable, her eyes cold and calculative as she observed the dragon girl. "Perhaps not now," she admitted, "but one day, I might be." Camp's smirk faltered, her red eyes narrowing dangerously. A low growl rumbled in her throat. "TCH. I'd rather Hades make Hecate his queen than you." Hera met her glare with unwavering serenity. At the end of the day, she said smoothly, that decision lies with Hades. Camp clenched her jaw, clearly annoyed but not willing to push the argument further. Her wings twitched in agitation, but she didn't say anything. Hera turned away, already walking toward the edge of the battlefield. Come. We need to return to camp. The real battle is yet to come. Camp scoffed but followed, shaking off the last remnants of blood from her claws. Yeah. Just try to keep up, Your Majesty. Hera ignored the jab, her mind already focused on what was coming next. As they walked through the dense forest, the scent of blood still clinging to Camp, Hera turned her gaze to the dragon woman. I assume you've taken care of Point A as well, she asked. Camp let out an amused snort, flicking her tail. Who do you think you're talking to? She retorted. Of course I did. And just like these fools, I left none alive. Hera exhaled slowly, suppressing her frustration. I suppose I should have expected that, she murmured, but let the matter rest. There was no changing Camp's nature. They continued in silence, the dense forest gradually thinning as they approached their destination. Soon, they stepped into a secluded grotto, hidden from prying eyes. The scene before them was one of controlled chaos. Hundreds of gods and divine spirits stood fully armed, their expressions grim yet resolute. Some were sharpening weapons, others practicing spells, while groups of warriors conversed in hushed tones. The tension in the air was almost suffocating, but it was laced with determination. As Hera and Camp made their way through the camp, the guard stationed at the entrance immediately straightened, offering deep bows in respect. Hera gave them a nod of acknowledgement before continuing on toward the heart of the encampment, the command post. Inside, they found Themis and Hades standing over a large stone table, a detailed map of the battlefield spread before them. Hades' piercing gaze lifted the moment they entered, settling first on Camp. Did you complete your mission? He asked, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. Camp placed a clawed hand on her hip, bowing slightly. I did, she confirmed. Both targets have been eliminated. No survivors. Hades gave a single nod of approval. Good. He then shifted his attention back to the map. With that, our preparations are complete. He placed a hand over the map, his fingers tracing strategic points. We can begin the next phase. We have finally isolated Iapetus, he continued. With the positions we've secured, we can strike him without fear of reinforcements. Themis nodded, her expression impassive. Zeus and Poseidon have also completed their preparations. Even if the Titans notice the attack, they will ensure no one interferes. Hera listened intently but found herself lost in thought. 3 years ago, after their crushing defeat, the gods had scattered, left to lick their wounds in hiding. At the time, she had thought it would take a miracle just to recover their strength. And yet, somehow, Zeus and Poseidon had managed to do more than just grow stronger. They had gathered an army. In the 3 years since their loss, they had rallied numerous gods and divine spirits to their cause. Some had been disillusioned with Cronus' rule, others had simply been waiting for an opportunity to rebel, and still others had been inspired by Zeus' unwavering ambition and charisma. Whatever the case, what had once seemed impossible had become reality. Hades, for all his foresight and cunning, had also underestimated them. He had anticipated that Zeus and Poseidon would hone their strength in isolation, preparing for a rematch against the Titans. But building an army? That was a development even he hadn't expected. Still, he didn't let his surprise show. Instead, he nodded slowly. Then everything is in place. We move on to Iapetus immediately. Far away, on Mount Orthes, Cronus reclined on his grand obsidian throne, his fingers drumming against the armrest in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The massive hall of his temple on Mount Orthes, lined with towering columns and illuminated by a golden, ethereal glow, was eerily silent, save for the steady voice of Atlas delivering his report. My king, 3 of the 4 pillar titans have suffered repeated assaults, Atlas stated, his powerful frame rigid with discipline. Their territories have been harassed and destabilized for months now. Crius has lost key outposts, Sia supply lines have been severed, and Iapetus has been completely cut off. Cronus exhaled sharply through his nose, his golden eyes narrowing. And Hyperion? Atlas hesitated for a moment before answering. Still wounded from his battle with Hades 3 years ago. Though his domain remains untouched, he has yet to fully recover. Cronus leaned forward slightly, his grip tightening on his throne.
He hummed.
Those children of mine. All this effort, all this desperation from a bunch of beaten mongrels clinging to their foolish ideals. He let out a low chuckle. It's nothing more than the futile struggle of a dying insect. Yet, even insects can be an annoyance, it seems. He considered, for a moment, launching a full-scale attack, gathering the might of his forces and crushing the remnants of the rebellion once and for all. With his power, it would be simple. A single, decisive strike to end this ridiculous farce. And yet, he did not move. His fingers ceased their drumming, and a slow, dangerous smirk spread across his face.
Prometheus.
Cronus knew that the Titan of Foresight was watching him. Always watching. The very moment he showed even the slightest carelessness, even the smallest crack in his composure, Prometheus would pounce like a vulture, exploiting it with ruthless precision. That one, no matter how harmless or loyal he pretended to be, was the most dangerous being in this entire war. Cronus' smirk faded as he exhaled slowly, reclining once more into his throne. Let them continue their pitiful resistance, he decided. Iapetus, Creos, and Ceus can handle it themselves. If they fail, then they were never worthy of standing by my side to begin with.
Atlas bowed his head slightly. As you command, my king.
Cronus waved a hand dismissively.
Go.
Continue monitoring the situation. I will act when I deem it necessary. Atlas turned and strode from the throne room, his heavy footsteps echoing against the grand marble floor. Cronus remained still, staring into the distance, his mind already weaving new strategies. Let them struggle. Let them believe they stand a chance. When the time came, he would crush them beneath his heel, utterly and without mercy. Iapetus sat rigidly on his grand stone throne, his fingers gripping the armrests so tightly that cracks began forming on its surface. His sharp, steely eyes burned with frustration as he glared at the flickering torches lining the temple walls. 4 months now, his lands had been under constant assault by the Olympians and their rebel forces. His men were being picked off one by one, their strongholds crumbling under an enemy that never stood still. Whenever he attempted to mount a counterattack, the bastards had already melted away into the shadows, vanishing before his forces could strike back. It was an infuriating game of cat and mouse, and Iapetus was beginning to feel like the mouse. His teeth clenched as a thought crossed his mind, if only Prometheus weren't so indifferent about this war. With his foresight, they could have easily rooted out the enemy's hiding place and crushed this insurrection before it grew into the festering wound that it had become. Instead, Prometheus sat on the sidelines, pretending to be neutral, while their enemies ran rampant. Iapetus let out a harsh exhale, his fury simmering just beneath the surface. Standing before him, his son, Menoetius, knelt on one knee, his own expression grim. The Titan god of violent anger had always been known for his explosive temper, but even now, he managed to hold himself in check in front of his father. What of our request for support? Iapetus finally demanded, his voice cold and sharp.
Menoetius frowned.
Creos and Ceus are facing the same problem as us, he answered. Their territories are also under siege, and they cannot spare any forces to assist. Iapetus growled under his breath.
And Hyperion?
Still recovering, Menoetius replied, his voice edged with irritation. He has gathered all of his forces around his temple to ensure his own safety. His lands remain untouched, but he refuses to act until he's fully healed. Iapetus slammed his fist onto the armrest, causing the entire temple to tremble. Cowards! Do they not see that if we keep letting the Olympians gain ground, we will be backed into a corner? We should be taking the fight to them, not sitting in our fortresses like frightened children. Menoetius remained silent, knowing better than to add fuel to his father's anger. Just then, hurried footsteps echoed through the temple. A divine spirit, one of Iapetus' messengers, rushed inside, breathing heavily as he dropped to one knee before the Titan.
My lord. Urgent news.
Iapetus' eyes snapped toward him, his frustration sharpening into a deadly focus.
Speak.
The divine spirit swallowed, still catching his breath. There has been a breach in the western stronghold. The enemy forces. Before he could finish, Iapetus shot to his feet, his divine aura surging through the temple like a violent storm.
What?
Menoetius' own energy flared, his fists clenching. That stronghold was heavily fortified. How did they get past our defenses? The divine spirit lowered his head. We don't know, my lords. The garrison was wiped out before they could even send word. The few who survived spoke of shadows moving through the walls, striking before they could react. Iapetus' fury burned hotter. Shadows. This wasn't just another skirmish. This was the work of someone dangerous. Someone who knew how to bypass even the most fortified positions. His mind immediately went to one name. Hecate, he muttered darkly, his voice laced with venom. Menoetius' expression darkened at the mention of her name. Iapetus turned back to the divine spirit. What of the attackers? Where are they now? The divine spirit hesitated. They vanished after the attack, my lord. As if they were never there. Iapetus' jaw tightened, fuming. However, before he could think of his next move, another divine spirit burst into the hall, panting heavily. His expression, however, was not one of fear but urgency. My lord. We have found it. Iapetus' eyes, which had been burning with frustration just moments ago, suddenly sharpened with interest. Found it. His voice was low and dangerous. Found what? Be specific. The divine spirit bowed his head. Yes, my lord. The base of operations of the rebels. We have finally located them. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Menoetius' grin widened into something almost feral. About damn time, he muttered, his fingers curling into fists. I'm getting bored of all these cat and mouse games. Iapetus took a slow step forward, his towering figure radiating power. Continue, he ordered, his voice brimming with barely contained excitement. The divine spirit straightened himself. A minor god of silence, one of our informants, managed to track some divine spirits loyal to the rebels. He followed them without being detected and discovered their hideout. They are concealed within a secluded grotto at the very border of your territory. Iapetus' lips curled into a dark smile. How reliable is this information? Very. The god is still there, my lord. He has been watching them carefully and has confirmed significant activity. The rebels are gathered in large numbers, preparing for something. Menoetius let out a sharp, eager laugh. Ha! And here we were, chasing shadows, while the rats built a nest right under our noses. Iapetus exhaled through his nose, his excitement growing. Then this is our chance. We will end them tonight. He turned abruptly, his divine aura surging, shaking the very foundations of the temple. Summon every available force. I want the armies ready to march within the hour. We will crush them in one decisive strike. The divine spirits quickly bowed and rushed out of the hall, their footsteps echoing as they hurried to fulfill his command. Menoetius was practically vibrating with anticipation. Shall I lead the vanguard? He asked, his grin stretching wider. Iapetus turned to him, his expression unreadable for a moment before he smirked. No. You will lead the main force. We are not simply harassing them this time, we are annihilating them. I want no survivors. Menoetius' grin widened further, his crimson eyes gleaming with a promise of bloodshed. Finally, he growled. No more games. Iapetus stepped forward, his fists clenched. For 3 years, they have hidden, striking from the shadows like cowards. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. For 3 years, they have mocked us with their insolence. He extended a hand, divine energy crackling around his fingers. But tonight, we will make them regret ever defying the Titans. Menoetius slammed a fist into his palm. Let's burn their little grotto to the ground. With that, the temple erupted into a frenzy of movement as the Titan god of mortality and his forces prepared for war. In the depths of an alternate dimension, a place of darkness and shadow, stood a fortress, and within its secluded chamber shrouded in eternal darkness, Hades stood alone. The air was thick with the weight of his divinity, an oppressive presence that seemed to consume even the faintest light. Before him, hovering above a jagged obsidian pedestal, was a crystal ball swirling with shadows. Reflections of distant figures flickered within its depths, figures belonging to the forces of Iapetus. His cold, calculating gaze was locked onto the minor god of silence, the spy who had unknowingly walked straight into his web. Hades watched as the god remained hidden at the edge of the grotto, his wary eyes scanning the movements of what he believed to be the gathered Olympian rebels. The fool had no idea that what he saw was nothing more than an illusion. Hades allowed himself the faintest smirk. It is all going according to plan. At this very moment, Iapetus was surely assembling his armies, blinded by his own arrogance, believing that this was finally his chance to crush the resistance. But Hades had orchestrated every step of this dance. The rebels in the grotto were not his actual forces. Every single one of his people had already been hidden, simply waiting for a signal to strike. What remained in there were his Shadow Knights, his personal army of spectral warriors forged from the deepest abyss of the underworld and his dominion over darkness and shadows. Their forms had been altered by HADES sorcery, their appearances indistinguishable from the true rebels. They moved, they spoke, and they breathed, all as if they were real. Even the minor god of silence, with all his skills in espionage, had not sensed the deception. Hades exhaled softly, watching as the crystal ball flickered. He knew exactly what would happen next. Iapetus would rally his forces, gathering everything he had for a single, decisive strike. He would march into the grotto with all the confidence of a conqueror, expecting to deal a fatal blow. After all, Iapetus is an impulsive and arrogant titan who can't stand humiliation. And all these months have been nothing but humiliation for him. But he will soon know that what awaits him aren't rebels waiting to be slaughtered, but predators waiting for their prey. The instant the titans launched their assault, the illusion would shatter. The shadows would rise, the knights would descend, the rebels would rage, and the real war would begin. And Hades, he would be waiting. Alone in the suffocating darkness, he whispered to himself, his voice barely more than a breath. Tonight, a titan falls. Beneath the crimson sky, Iapetus stood atop a raised obsidian platform outside his grand temple, overlooking the vast army assembled before him. Titans, gods, and divine spirits alike stood shoulder to shoulder, their weapons gleaming under the dimming light of dusk. The air crackled with tension, with anticipation, as they awaited the words of their commander. Iapetus raised his arm, and silence fell over the gathered forces. His eyes blazed with fury as he surveyed his soldiers. Then, in a voice that shook the very earth, he spoke. "Brothers, sisters, warriors of the old gods, too long have we tolerated these parasites." His voice thundered across the battlefield. These ungrateful wretches who dare call themselves gods. These mongrels who spit in the faces of the very beings that birthed the cosmos. Who twist fate to their favor and believe themselves worthy of the throne. The army roared in agreement, their rage fanned like flames upon dry wood. For 3 years, they have gnawed at us like vermin, scurrying in the dark, hiding behind tricks and cowardice. But no more. He clenched his fist, his divine aura surging outward, sending shockwaves through the gathered forces. Tonight, we rip them from their holes. Tonight, we remind them that they are nothing. That they exist only because we allow it. The soldiers howled, slamming weapons against shields, their cries of anger and anticipation shaking the heavens. Iapetus extended his arm towards the distant horizon. No more shall they whisper rebellion in the shadows. No more shall they sully the name of the Titans. We will descend upon them like the great storms of old. We will show them what true gods are. Menoetius, standing at the forefront, clenched his fists, his body trembling with barely restrained excitement. Iapetus turned to him, his eyes blazing. Menoetius, lead the charge. Tear through them like wildfire. The Titan of violent anger let out a savage grin, his eyes glinting with bloodlust. With pleasure, father. Without hesitation, Menoetius exploded into motion. He shot into the sky with such force that the very air screamed in protest, a thunderous sonic boom echoing through the land as he became a crimson blur against the heavens. The army below followed, their roars of war turning into a deafening chorus as thousands of divine beings launched into the sky, their weapons glinting like falling stars. Their march was silent yet swift. Like shadows of death, they moved across the vast lands, encircling the secluded grotto where the Olympians had hidden. Their numbers stretched across the horizon, forming an unbreakable siege. And then, as they peered into the grotto from the cliffs above, they saw them. The rebels. Hundreds of gods and divine spirits gathered, their weapons ready, unaware of the doom looming over them. A triumphant grin curled on Menoetius' lips. They're done for. He stared at his soldiers and raised his hand. "Slaughter them. Leave none alive." The moment Menoetius roared, the battlefield erupted into chaos. The Titans' forces descended like a tidal wave upon the rebels, who barely had time to register what was happening before they were torn apart. Screams filled the air, agonized, desperate, and hopeless. The rebels scrambled to form a defense, but it was meaningless. The Titan soldiers struck like executioners, cutting them down with cruel efficiency. Blades sank into flesh, spears impaled bodies, and divine ichor painted the earth in shimmering gold. Menoetius relished in the slaughter. He tore through his enemies with his bare hands, ripping limbs from bodies, crushing skulls between his fingers. He laughed as he hurled a struggling divine spirit into the air and punched a hole through their chest before they could hit the ground. The rebel gods were weak, pathetic. They fought with desperation, not conviction, and that was why they would die. One god, bloodied and barely standing, raised his sword in a last-ditch effort to strike him. "Die, you Titan scum!" Menoetius grabbed the weapon mid-swing, shattering the blade in his grip before grabbing the god's throat and squeezing. "You could have lived a long life, but you chose to rebel." Menoetius grinned as he tightened his grip. The rebel thrashed, his hands clawing at Menoetius' wrist, but his strength was fading. The next moment, his eyes dimmed, and his struggle soon ceased. Menoetius dropped the lifeless body and stepped forward, crushing it beneath his foot as he turned to find his next prey. It took less than an hour. The last rebel fell, his dying scream cut short as a Titan impaled him from behind. Silence followed. The once secluded grotto, once filled with the hope of resistance, was now a field of corpses. Menoetius stood amidst the carnage, chest rising and falling with exhilaration. He was covered in divine ichor, some his own, but mostly that of his enemies. He lifted his blood-stained fist into the air and bellowed, "This war has ended. The rebels have been annihilated." The soldiers roared with him, raising their weapons, cheering in savage triumph. The rebels were no more. But then, the sky bled. The cheers died in their throats as the heavens shifted, twisting into an unnatural crimson hue. The air thickened, turning heavy and oppressive, as if reality itself had been distorted. A feeling of dread gripped even the mightiest among them. Menoetius' eyes widened. A bounded field? Here? But how? A bounded field is a geographical form of magic whereby one knits a boundary line of magical energy around a space to separate its inside from the outside, cutting off and isolating that space from the outside world and then imposing an effect on the inside or the boundary line itself. Menoetius could feel it, the space around them sealed off. There was no escape. The field extended too far, too wide. It was a bounded field unlike any other. Trapping this many divine beings at once was something only one entity in the cosmos was capable of. "No, it can't be," he murmured, his fists clenching. Then, the sky darkened further, and from the blood-stained heavens, she descended. A lone figure, clad in flowing black, as if the very night had woven itself into her gown. Her presence was undeniable. Hecate, the goddess of magic, crossroads, and ghosts. Even before she joined Hades in this war, she was feared for her ability known as magic that she had developed. An ability to create a phenomenon through the use of energy that is different from divinity, that is magic. She hovered in the air, her ethereal form bathed in a soft, eerie glow, her eyes unblinking. In one hand, she held a lamp, its purple flame flickering ominously. The other hand rested at her side, but her fingers twitched slightly, like a puppeteer, preparing to move her strings. Her gaze swept across the battlefield, and she smiled. It was not a smile of joy. It was not a smile of mercy. It was a smile that sent chills through every divine being present. Menoetius swallowed. He knew then, they had been played. Back in his temple, Iapetus sat upon his throne, his fingers drumming against the armrest. His confidence was absolute. This operation would be a complete success. The war would end tonight, and the rebels would be nothing more than an unpleasant memory. He leaned back, exhaling in satisfaction. It's over. The rebel forces should have already been annihilated by now. But what is it? Those words were uttered, calm, almost casual, but they sent a chill down Iapetus' spine. His smirk vanished. His eyes darted around the temple, scanning for the source, and at that moment, thick purple mist had seeped into the room. It slithered along the marble floors, curling around the pillars, creeping up the walls. His once grand hall, illuminated by sacred torches, now flickered in dim, eerie light. He stood abruptly, summoning his divine power to dispel the fog, but it did not move, it did not even waver. It was not ordinary mist. It was something far worse. Then, a figure emerged. From the thick, cloying darkness, Hades stepped forward. His presence was subdued, his form clad in his usual black robes, but there was an undeniable weight to him, a pressure that made the very air tremble. His expression was calm and serene, but his gaze held a glint of something inexplicable, something dangerous. Iapetus' instinct screamed. Something had gone terribly wrong with the attack. But he was a titan, one of the four pillars. He did not flinch, nor did he show any sign of losing his composure. He straightened his posture, adopting a cold, unaffected demeanor. His voice was steady as he said, "If it isn't my nephew, Hades, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Hades did not answer immediately. Instead, he took another step forward, his fingers idly tracing the mist around him as though he had all the time in the world. Then, he spoke, his voice smooth, almost amused. "I've long coveted your domain, Iapetus," he said lightly, as if discussing the weather. "The dominion over mortality. And now, I think I'll take it for myself." A beat of silence. Then, Iapetus laughed. A deep, resounding chuckle that echoed through the mist-covered temple. He shook his head, eyes gleaming with disdain. "You think you can just take my domain?" he scoffed. His fingers twitched, and his spear materialized in his grip, tall, jagged, and crackling with divine energy. He spun it once, then leveled the sharp tip at Hades. "If you want it so badly, then come and take it." Hades stopped walking. Then, he smiled. A slow, playful smile, one that did not reach his eyes. The shadows behind him shifted, coiling unnaturally as something black and formless began to rise. Then, in a single fluid motion, Hades lifted his hand, and summoned his own spear. It was made of pure darkness, an obsidian construct that seemed to drink the light around it. The spearhead gleamed with a razor-thin edge, and the space around it warped. Hades twirled it once, then took a step forward, lowering into a stance. "Very well," he said. "Shall we begin?" Menoetius stood frozen in place, his eyes wide with disbelief as the tide of battle shifted in an instant. One moment, his forces were victorious, tearing apart the last remnants of the rebel army. The next, they were the ones being slaughtered. Out of thin air, thousands of rebels emerged. They did not rush out from hiding, nor did they arrive late to the battle. They simply appeared, as if reality itself had deceived them. The soldiers he had once dismissed as dead were now standing, but they were not the same. Their bodies were shadows, formless yet solid, twisted into humanoid shapes. Their eyes burned with blazing purple flames, the only light in their darkened forms. And they moved without hesitation, cutting through his forces with merciless efficiency. Menoetius watched, rage boiling in his chest as his once proud army fell apart. "What the hell is this?" he roared. His soldiers screamed as the shadowy figures and the rebel forces tore into them, their divine flesh shredded like mere paper. Some tried to fight back, but it was useless. The moment they killed one shadow, another would appear and attack them, while a rebel god would kill them. Others attempted to flee, they did not get far. One by one, they were cut down, their divine essence absorbed into the very things that killed them. Menoetius gritted his teeth, feeling a divine amount of anger and hatred. His rage needed an outlet, or he might explode. His glowing eyes snapped to Hecate, who stared at him with her impassive gaze. She floated above them all, serene and composed, watching the slaughter as if she had orchestrated it from the beginning. "You! Damn you, Hecate!" With a deafening boom, Menoetius launched himself into the sky, his body blazing like a meteor. He shot toward Hecate at terrifying speed. He summoned an axe and raised it high, intending to split her in two. Hecate did not flinch. She simply snapped her fingers. And suddenly, the world around them vanished. Menoetius blinked. Moments ago, he was in the battlefield. Now, everything was dark. Empty. Silent. There was no sky, no land, no battlefield, only endless, boundless nothingness. He was still facing Hecate, still poised to strike her down. She stood calmly, her black dress flowing in the unseen wind, the faint glow of her lantern casting eerie shadows in this void. But something was wrong. He tried to move, but he couldn't. No, it wasn't that he was frozen. He could still feel his body, still feel his limbs moving forward. Yet he wasn't getting any closer. It was as if the space between them stretched endlessly. He couldn't get close to her no matter how much he tried. Menoetius' breath hitched. His grip on his axe tightened as frustration set in. What is this? Hecate's gaze was indifferent as she spoke. A simple spell. Her voice was soft, almost amused, as she explained. It is called infinity, a magic that stretches the concept of distance between me and my target to infinity. Menoetius snarled. What nonsense are you talking about? He swung his axe. It should have split her in half. But instead, his attack never reached. It was right in front of her. Yet infinitely far away. What the hell? You and I may appear to stand in the same space, Hecate continued, tilting her head. But no matter how much you struggle, no matter how much you try, you will never reach me. Menoetius' breathing grew heavy, his frustration boiling over. He roared, swinging his axe again and again, putting all his divine strength into each blow. None of them landed. Hecate merely watched, unimpressed. Then, she raised her free hand. Enough. Her lantern flared. A new kind of magic spread through the void, ancient, oppressive, and terrifying. Menoetius felt something change. The darkness around them warped. No, it wasn't just the darkness, it was the very nature of the world itself. Let me show you the truth. The primordial hell that was before there was. The stars vanished. The laws of reality shattered. In their place, a vision took form, a place before creation, before order, before the heavens and the earth were split apart. It was hell. A world where there was no land, only an endless expanse of fire and poison. This is the origin of the concept of the land of the dead used in all pantheons. Where blazing magma and scorching gas churned, creating an atmosphere where even the strongest divine beings would suffocate and burn. A place where ice and fire coexisted in chaos, where the very air could freeze your lungs yet boil your flesh at the same time. A planet in its primordial state, before Genesis. Hecate's voice echoed like a divine decree. HADES. The world ruptured. The void shattered. Menoetius barely had time to react before it swallowed him whole. He did not scream, there was no time. The moment it touched him, his very existence unraveled. His divine body eroded into nothingness. His consciousness collapsed into the abyss. And then, he was gone. The battlefield was drenched in golden ichor. The ground, once firm and untouched, was now a broken wasteland of scattered limbs, torn armor, and charred corpses. The air reeked of burnt flesh and despair. And at the center of the carnage stood Camp. The woman hailed as the dragon of Hades. Her long crimson hair was slick with divine blood, clinging to her pale, flawless skin. Her piercing red eyes burned with exhilaration, reflecting the flames that still licked at the bodies of her victims. She grinned, revealing her feral and sharp tooth, as she ripped a god in half with her bare hands, his final scream barely escaping his throat before it was drowned out by the wet sound of his body splitting apart. Any gods or titans she had set her eyes on didn't even bother trying to fight. They immediately abandoned all hope of resistance and fled. Pathetic, Camp chuckled, her voice dripping with amusement. These are the great soldiers of the current ruler of the cosmos? With a lazy wave of her clawed hand, she whipped her tail around, sending a wave of razor-sharp winds that severed fleeing gods in half. Aha! Ichor sprayed like rain, staining her already blood-soaked body. One of the surviving gods, a warrior with golden armor and a twin-bladed spear, stood his ground. His body trembled, but he refused to run. Camp's grin widened. Finally, someone with guts. He's weak, but at least he actually dares to stand up. The god took a deep breath, his divine aura flaring. Death to the rebels. He screamed, his spear burned with white-hot light as he lunged toward her, his movements a blur of speed and precision. Camp laughed in delight. She moved with inhuman grace, dodging his strikes as if she were dancing. Each attack that could have severed her head or pierced her heart was met with nothing but empty air. "You're fun," she purred. "But you'll burn just the same." Before he could react, She opened her mouth, a torrent of hellfire erupted. He knew, at this moment, he is going to die. But he remained firm, his eyes burning with determination. Hail Cronus, King of Cosmos! The golden warrior screamed as flames of pure destruction engulfed him. His armor melted in seconds, his skin peeled away like wax, and his bones glowed red before turning to ash. When the fire died, nothing remained. I don't know your name, but I acknowledge your spirit as a warrior. Camp let out a satisfied sigh, stretching her arms before turning her gaze back to the battlefield. There was no one left. Her army stood victorious, their war cries shaking the heavens. The enemies have fallen. Victory is ours. Death to Cronus. Hail the Olympians. The rebel gods and divine spirits roared in unison, weapons raised high, the glow of their divine forms flickering against the destruction around them. Their enemies had been slaughtered to the last. The Titans' forces had been eradicated. Just as the cries of triumph reached their peak, the space above them twisted. The shadows stretched unnaturally, forming a vortex of darkness, and from within, a lone figure emerged. Hecate. She descended like a phantom, her black dress billowing against the ethereal wind. The lamp in her hand flickered with an eerie glow, casting ghostly shadows over the battlefield. Her eyes swept across the celebration, but there was no trace of emotion on her face. She landed silently beside Camp, who was still licking golden ichor from her fingers. "You're late," Camp smirked, not bothering to look at her. "Was that brat too much for you?" Hecate remained silent. She wasn't paying any attention at Camp. She was staring at the distance. A dark mist loomed beyond the battlefield, a silent omen of the battle still yet to be fought. Her voice was quiet but filled with something heavier than the battlefield of corpses behind her. Hades. He had gone to fight Iapetus alone. And Hecate could feel it. The battle between gods was about to reach its climax. The temple shook as Hades and Iapetus charged at each other. There was no fanfare. No declarations of war. No grandiose displays of power. Just pure combat. Instinctively, the two recognized each other as a warrior and a fellow master of the spear. Naturally, their pride as spearmasters would like for them to prove who between them is superior. The sound of their spears clashing against one another sent shockwaves through the massive chamber, the force alone splintering the stone pillars that held up the temple's ceiling. Iapetus, the Titan of mortality, was a warrior of brute strength and overwhelming force. His spear struck like a comet, each thrust meant to kill in one decisive blow. His movements were swift but heavy, each one carrying enough power to tear through mountains. Hades, however, was a shadow in motion. He danced around Iapetus' relentless attacks with inhuman grace, his footwork impeccable, his spear an extension of his will. Unlike Iapetus, who struck with the full force of a titan's wrath, Hades was precise, calculative, and deadly. At their level, this is a fight where single misstep meant death. And neither was willing to be the first to fall. Their spears met again, the impact shattering the ground beneath them. The shockwave ripped through the temple, blasting apart ancient walls and sending debris flying in every direction. Iapetus smirked. "You fight well for a whelp," he growled, pushing against Hades' spear with overwhelming strength. "Honestly, I have long since been interested in fighting you ever since I saw you 3 years ago." Hades' expression remained unreadable as he twisted his spear, deflecting Iapetus' power to the side and immediately countering with a thrust aimed at his throat. Iapetus barely managed to parry, but Hades was already moving. A quick step forward. A low spin. A slash aimed at Iapetus' ribs. A series of combinations that would surely kill any less skillful gods. But Iapetus dodged just in time, feeling the cold wind of the passing spear graze his skin. For the first time in millennia, the Titan of mortality felt something unusual. Excitement. Iapetus let out a booming laugh. "This is fun. We are both the same, truly. You understand the importance of skill rather than relying on your divinity." He lunged forward, his attacks becoming faster and sharper. Each strike was meant to kill in one hit. If one was even a millisecond late in dodging, the attack would surely kill them. Yet Hades matched him blow for blow. The temple crumbled around them, each clash of their spears sending cracks through the marble floors, collapsing statues, and breaking through ancient ceilings. The battlefield was becoming a ruin, and yet, neither warrior slowed down. Their fight was an art of destruction. A symphony of chaos. A fight of pure skills and mastery without having to rely on their own divinity. Iapetus lunged again, thrusting his spear forward with terrifying speed. Hades tilted his head to the side, narrowly avoiding it. In a blur of motion, he retaliated, his spear slicing through the air like a whisper of death. Iapetus blocked. Barely. The force of Hades' attack sent a powerful shockwave through his arms. The impact alone left deep cracks along the Titan's spear, the divine metal groaning under the force. It was at this moment when Iapetus realized something. Hades wasn't just defending. He was testing him. Iapetus narrowed his eyes. "You're holding back." Hades gave a small smirk. "So are you." Iapetus smirked in return. "Indeed. But I've gotten curious. Do you mind if I ask something?" "Ask away." Hades shrugs. He doesn't mind a small talk with an opponent worthy of respect. Just Iapetus' skill with a spear is enough for Hades to respect him. "Why do you participate in this war? The Underworld is completely under Nyx's watch. Not even Cronus dared to step foot there. As its king, surely your authority would even be as great as Cronus's. So why do you fight?" Hades gazed at Iapetus, his expression unreadable. The battlefield around them was shrouded in mist and shadow, the remnants of their power already twisting the world in unnatural ways. The question hung in the air, heavy and demanding, but Hades did not rush to answer. He thought back to the beginning. At first, he had fought simply to survive. He and his brothers were thrown into this war not by choice, but by necessity. Cronus would never allow them to live freely. That much had been clear from the moment they were born. So he sought strength. But strength alone was not enough. When Hades was recognized as the king of the Underworld, a land of death and darkness, a realm where none dared to step foot, he had finally tasted what it feels like to have power and authority. For him, the Underworld was not a prison. It was a throne. A throne where he reigned absolutely. Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, ruled the deeper abyss, but she did not interfere in the affairs of the Underworld. And so, within its boundaries, Hades held a power that rivaled even Cronus himself. Yet, despite that power, despite the security of his domain, he still fought. Why? The answer was simple. Hades exhaled slowly, gripping his spear as his gaze hardened. Because Cronus does not deserve to rule. Iapetus raised a brow. Is that all? That is enough. Hades stepped forward, the ground beneath him cracking under his presence. I have no grand ambitions to rule the cosmos. I have no desire to conquer. But I refuse to acknowledge an incompetent tyrant who fears his own children. The sky above them rumbled, responding to the fury beneath his calm words. Cronus is weak. Hades' voice was cold, sharp as the edge of his spear. Not in strength, but in mind. He rules through fear, not through wisdom. He devours his own kin, not out of necessity, but out of cowardice. He does not lead, he hoards power like a child afraid of the dark. And that is why he must be cast down. Iapetus studied him for a long moment. Then, he let out a low chuckle. Ah, interesting. The mist around them stirred as Iapetus lifted his spear once more. His golden eyes gleamed with something between amusement and acknowledgement. Then show me, Hades. His grin widened. Show me the strength to drag a king from his throne. Hades' eyes burned with abyssal fire. I intend to. And with that, they clashed once more. Iapetus feinted left, then instantly twisted his spear to strike from the right. Hades dodged, stepping back, but Iapetus was already there, closing the distance, forcing Hades into a corner. You are fast, but not fast enough. Iapetus roared. His spear came down with the force of a meteor. Hades caught it. Iapetus' eyes widened in shock as Hades grabbed his spear with one hand, stopping the attack completely. For a moment, everything was still. You're kidding. Iapetus smiled wryly. Even Atlas couldn't resist that. Then, Hades retaliated. In one fluid motion, he twisted his body, bringing the blunt end of his spear up and smashing it against Iapetus' jaw. The impact sent the Titan crashing through the temple walls, breaking through stone, metal, and marble like paper. Iapetus tumbled, rolling through the debris before coming to a stop. His vision swam, the taste of ichor filling his mouth. Slowly, he wiped his lips and looked at his hand. He was bleeding. The realization made him pause. It had been a long, long time since anyone had managed to wound him without the use of divinity. He looked up. Hades was already standing before him. His spear pointed directly at the Titan's throat. "Yield," Hades said simply. Iapetus stared at him. Then, he grinned. "Not yet." Iapetus rose to his feet, rolling his shoulders. The bones in his body cracked and reset, his injuries healing instantly. Hades didn't move. He simply watched as Iapetus' form began to change. The air grew heavier. The light in the sky dimmed, as if something dark and ancient was awakening. Iapetus smirked as he lifted his spear. "I'll admit," he said, his voice gaining an unnatural weight. "You surprised me. You are strong, Hades. Stronger than I expected." The wind howled around them as a dark aura began to rise from Iapetus' body. "But without our divine power, this battle will never end. So let us cast aside these mortal chains and fight as we were meant to." His eyes glowed with golden fury. Hades tilted his head slightly. For a brief moment, he seemed to consider it. Then, he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they burned with the abyss. Dark mist poured from his body, creeping across the ruined battlefield like a living entity. The shadows twisted and danced unnaturally, forming shapes of writhing creatures, whispering voices in a language older than time itself. Iapetus' smirk widened. "Finally." Hades raised his spear. "Then let us begin." And then, the world exploded. The battlefield trembled as two titanic forces collided. Hades and Iapetus moved like shadows and lightning, spears clashing in bursts of sparks that tore apart the temple walls around them. Each strike sent shockwaves rippling through the mist-filled chamber, cracking the ground and causing ancient pillars to crumble into dust. Iapetus, the Titan of mortality, was a warrior who had stood at the dawn of time. His every movement was precise, brutal, and absolute. His spear cut through the air with a terrifying sharpness, slicing through space itself. Hades met him head-on, weaving through the Titan's attacks with effortless grace, his own spear a weapon of pure abyssal darkness. The two warriors fought without hesitation, not as gods, but as killers. Iapetus' spear lashed out in a deadly arc. Hades ducked, the tip grazing the air where his throat had been a second before. He countered immediately, his spear surging forward, wreathed in darkness. Iapetus barely twisted out of the way. The shockwave alone sent him skidding back. He smirked. "Not bad, King of the Dead," he said, rolling his shoulders. "But you do realize, don't you? Even a god like you can die by my hands." Hades remained silent, his expression unreadable. His grip on his spear tightened. Iapetus grinned wider. "I am the Titan of mortality. Just one hit. One hit." He raised his weapon, the air around it shimmering with an eerie glow. "If I strike you once, your immortality shatters. If I strike you twice, you die. Forever." Hades' gaze darkened. He had known of Iapetus' authority. The Titan was death incarnate, not of the natural, gradual kind, but of the brutal, irreversible end. His spear did not merely wound. It imposed absolute mortality upon his target, stripping away any chance for survival and resurrection. A lesser god would have hesitated. A lesser god would have feared. Hades only stepped forward. "Try it." And with that, they clashed again. The impact of their battle sent shockwaves through the planet. From the outside, the entire temple seemed to writhe in agony. The very foundations cracked, and the mist covering the battlefield turned into a raging storm. Massive stone pillars crumbled into dust as their divine power clashed, shattering reality itself within the temple walls. Far away, the rebel gods could feel it. Hecate, Camp, and the others paused in their victory, turning their gazes toward the ruined temple where Hades fought alone. Hecate narrowed her eyes. "That fool," she muttered. Camp, still covered in the ichor of fallen enemies, let out a sharp laugh. "He's enjoying himself." The gods exchanged glances. Some wanted to rush in. Others knew better. A battle of this scale was beyond interference. Inside the temple, Hades dodged another lethal strike by a hair's breadth. The spear whistled past his ribs, and the moment it did, he felt it, the tearing sensation of his divine essence unraveling just from being near the attack. Iapetus wasn't bluffing. Hades leaped back, landing lightly on a fractured column. He exhaled. So this is the power of the Titan of Mortality. Iapetus smirked, spinning his spear before planting it into the ground. The earth beneath them split open in deep, jagged cracks. What's the matter? Iapetus taunted. Starting to regret facing me alone? Hades scoffed. Hardly. Without warning, he surged forward. Iapetus barely had time to react. Hades was fast. Too fast. His movements were impossibly smooth, as if he were slipping through the gaps of the world itself. His spear lashed out, and Iapetus barely raised his weapon in time to block. A second too late, the tip of Hades' spear carved across the Titan's cheek, drawing golden ichor. Iapetus' eyes widened slightly. Hades did not stop. He pressed forward, spear moving like a serpent, each thrust and slash a perfect balance of aggression and precision. Iapetus gritted his teeth, barely managing to block each attack. Then, Hades shifted. In an instant, he was behind him. Reacting quickly, Iapetus spun, and Hades jerked back just in time as Iapetus' spear nearly grazed his chest. The tip whistled past him, carving into the air, and Hades felt it. The searing pain of his own divine essence unraveling. His eyes widened slightly. Iapetus grinned. One hit. The wound wasn't deep. But it didn't need to be. The authority had taken effect. Hades was now mortal. The realization hit him as the temple rumbled violently. His power remained intact, but his body was now just like any other warrior's. He could die. And Iapetus only needed one more strike to ensure that he did. The Titan smirked. Well, that evens things up, doesn't it? Hades was silent. For a long moment, the two warriors simply stared at one another. Then, both of them took a step back. A mutual understanding passed between them. Hades rolled his shoulders, his spear vanishing back into the shadows. His expression remained unreadable, but the air around him had shifted. Iapetus smiled, his eyes gleaming. No more playing around, then? Hades exhaled. No more playing around. The ground beneath them began to crack apart. The mist thickened, turning black. The very air shuddered under the weight of something far more terrifying than before. And then, they unleashed their divine power. The entire world shook. Hades exhaled slowly. In his right hand, a spear formed from the void itself began to materialize. Its shaft was as dark as the abyss, pitch black and jagged, with barbs running along its length. The tip pulsed with something deeper than magic, deeper than divine power, something that did not belong in this world. It was spear crafted to him by the Cyclops. Desmos. Iapetus stilled. His eyes sharpened, narrowing in recognition of what this was. Death. That spear was dangerous. He could feel it in his very essence. It was not a mere weapon, it was a concept made real. A force that did not simply kill but erased. Hades lifted the spear, letting the darkness of the underworld coil around it like living shadows. His voice was calm and steady. Iapetus, you are the first opponent worthy enough to witness this spear. Be honored. Iapetus smirked. I'm flattered. Without another word, they moved. The world shattered beneath their speed. One moment, they stood apart. The next, their spears clashed. The force of their collision sent shockwaves rippling through space, tearing through earth and sending walls crumbling into dust. The air itself twisted violently, forming a storm of pure chaos. Iapetus struck first. His spear blurred forward, aiming for Hades' throat. Hades tilted his head, just barely. The tip of Iapetus' spear skimmed past his skin, cutting through strands of his silver hair. Hades retaliated. Desmos lashed out in response, its barbed tip cutting through space itself. Iapetus twisted his body, dodging by a hair's breadth, but the aftershock of the attack sent cracks racing through the temple floor. It was a dance of death. Every strike from Iapetus carried absolute lethality. Having already been hit once, just one more hit would ensure his death. But Desmos was something beyond mere destruction. Hades knew that if even a scratch landed, the spear's curse would take effect. And once its name was called, fate itself would be undone. Neither could afford to take a single hit. Iapetus lunged. His spear blurred forward, its speed breaking the sound barrier. Hades sidestepped, his body a blur of motion, then countered. Desmos came down in a brutal arc. Iapetus brought his weapon up to block, but the moment Desmos made contact, the world twisted. A deep, unnatural distortion spread from the impact point, as if reality itself was being rewritten. A black curse surged outward, seeking to consume anything in its path. Iapetus jumped back immediately, his instincts screaming at him. His spear, one forged at the dawn of time, was corroding. For the first time, Iapetus frowned. That spear, Hades smirked. Desmos is no ordinary weapon. The shadows around him deepened, swirling like living entities. Once its name has been called, Desmos will show its true power. Iapetus' eyes sharpened. His grip on his weapon tightened. What is it? Hades exhaled. A cursed spear that strikes destiny and aims for the heart, a spear that reverses causality. The words resounded through the underworld. Iapetus' expression finally shifted. He understood now. The spear did not simply strike a target. It struck destiny itself. A weapon that ensured its attack had already landed before it was even thrown. It was a cursed spear that devoured any who had been pierced by darkness. A weapon that struck before it was aimed. The striking stance was merely a formality, as the spear had already pierced the target. Hades raised Desmos. The world went still. Strike and pierce, Desmos. The moment the name was spoken, the spear became something more. The moment it was aimed, it had already pierced. Iapetus barely had time to react, or rather, Iapetus doesn't have any chance to react. Darkness surged forward. His instincts screamed at him to move. He twisted his body, his spear lashing out in defense, but Desmos had already struck. The black spear pierced his chest. Straight through the heart. The Titan froze. Time itself seemed to stop. There was no pain. No sound. Only a terrible, inescapable certainty. Iapetus slowly looked down. Golden ichor dripped from his lips. His hands trembled as he reached for the spear impaling him, but his fingers passed through it like smoke. The wound was already done. The future had already been written. Iapetus chuckled, his voice rough. So, this is how I die. Hades stood before him, expression unreadable. Iapetus exhaled. Good. Good. I'm glad. Hades' eyes narrowed. Why? Iapetus smiled, his golden eyes dimming. Because I die by a warrior's hands. There was something genuine in his voice. Hades stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. Desmos vanished from Iapetus' chest, its work complete. The Titan swayed, his body already fading. Hades raised his hand, fingers curling into the empty air. His voice was steady. I will now take your authority. Iapetus chuckled. Very well. Take it. The moment those words were spoken, Hades brought down his hand. The cosmos itself trembled. It was a subtle shift at first, a ripple through the fabric of the world. Then, like a great wave crashing upon the shore, the very balance of existence was thrown into chaos. Something fundamental had changed. A Titan had fallen. And not just any Titan, Iapetus, one of the four pillars. His authority, once an immovable force that defined the world, had vanished. No, not vanished, but stolen. The other Titans felt it. Iapetus has been stripped of his domain and died. On Mount Orthes, inside Cronus' temple. Cronus' fingers froze mid-tap against the armrest of his grand throne. His eyes narrowed, and his face darkened as he felt the death of Iapetus and his stolen domain. For the past 3 years, the war had been an irritation, a nuisance that he allowed to exist because he found amusement in the struggle of his wayward children. But now, he felt it. The undeniable truth that one of his pillars had crumbled. The war he treated as nothing more than an entertainment has finally become a threat. The children he thought of as nothing more than a group of cats turned out to be a group of tigers, and they have bitten his arm off. He gripped his scythe, the very air around him twisting under the weight of his growing rage. Hades. His voice was a whisper, yet it carried through the vast halls of Mount Othries. He knew, out of all his children, that his eldest son was the most dangerous. Not only does he have all the underworld gods under his command, but his own strength is also nothing to scoff at. 3 years ago, he effortlessly defeated and gravely injured Hyperion, and he would have done the same to Atlas and the others had Cronus did not intervene. Although he said at that time that he got bored of their resistance, the truth is he doesn't want Hades to show his power, or the war will surely tip in the Olympians' favor. Cronus let out a slow breath, then stood from his throne, his divine presence expanding, suffocating. It seems I have allowed this war to continue for too long. A flick of his wrist, and a portal of golden mist appeared before him. Without another word, Cronus stepped through, vanishing from sight. He will win this war, no matter what the cost. He had fought for this throne he so rightfully deserved, and no one, not even his sons, will take this seat. Far from Cronus' throne, Atlas stood guard outside the grand temple, his colossal form rigid as the weight of the sky pressed down upon his shoulders. He felt it. The shift of power. The absence of his father. His grip on his massive club tightened. Iapetus. For all his arrogance, his father had been a warrior. Someone feared for his skills and mastery over countless weapons, but mostly spears. He was one of the titans who supported Cronus when he raised the flag of rebellion and fought off the primordial of sky, Uranus, the previous king of the cosmos. Iapetus is a competent and powerful general. And now he was gone. Atlas gritted his teeth. The implications were clear. If the Olympians were strong enough to kill a pillar, then they were no longer simply rebels. They were now a legitimate threat. A threat that must be eradicated. I should have killed them 3 years ago. But there was no time for regrets now. The Olympians have become such a dangerous force that there is no need to hesitate and just destroy them. He turned, his booming voice echoing through the halls of Cronus' fortress. Mobilize the legions. Titans, gods, and divine spirits alike rushed to obey, scrambling to prepare for war. They knew that the real war was about to begin. The war to decide the true king of the cosmos. Inside his temple, Ceus sat in quiet contemplation, eyes closed with his legs crossed, surrounded by an endless expanse of ever-expanding bookshelves. But suddenly, the world seems to have trembled, causing Ceus to abruptly open his eyes. Iapetus is dead. The words left his lips before he could stop them. He had felt it. The connecting they shared as members of the 4 pillars that supported Cronus. For a moment, he remained still, his mind racing. This is not possible. He had calculated countless possibilities, such as the Olympians growing in strength. He had foreseen their rebellion lasting years. He had even calculated a possibility where a pillar had fallen. For all of which he had already prepared countermeasures. But he had never calculated a pillar, much less Iapetus, falling so soon. Which means something or someone outside of his calculations has decided to intervene, which threw off every possibility he had thought of. He couldn't help but curse. If only Prometheus were more invested in this war than he is now, acting all bored and indifferent. His foresight would certainly be more useful now than just his own prediction based on the limited information they have. Ceus stood, his divine robe shifting like the night sky. There was no time to hesitate. If a titan has fallen, then they must hurry up and eliminate the rebellion before they can cause more damage. With a wave of his hand, he called forth his messengers, divine spirits who bowed before him, awaiting orders. Inform the rest of the pillars. The Olympians must be crushed before the scales tip further in their favor. The spirits vanished, rushing to carry out his decree. Ceus turned back to the endless expanse of books, his fingers trailing over a particular book. He needed to come up with more countermeasures soon. He doesn't want to go to a war completely unprepared. Far to the south, in the Temple of the Stars, Cryas stirred. For the first time in centuries, the constellations trembled, as if a great change occurred that disrupted the order of the cosmos. His connection to the heavens had been severed. No, not severed. Changed. His brother's light had been snuffed out. Cryas' expression darkened. Though he was not as warlike as Iapetus, though he did not revel in destruction like his kin, he understood what this meant. The Olympians were no longer an insignificant rebellion. They were now enemies of titans who actually pose a threat and not just annoying children. With a single movement, Cryas raised his staff to the heavens. The stars above shifted in response. The cosmos was preparing for war. And then there was Hyperion. The once proud Titan still sat upon his golden throne, his form weakened, his wounds from his battle with Hades still not fully healed. But even in his weakened state, he felt it. His brother was dead. A Titan, a pillar, was gone. Hyperion let out a slow, ragged breath, his skin glowing faintly. For a moment, silence filled his temple. Truthfully, ever since he had fought Hades and was thoroughly humiliated, he had already expected this day would come. Only he knew the depths of Hades' power. After all, he personally fought him. His fingers curled into fists, his nails biting into his palms. Iapetus is his brother, and he should have avenged him. But Hyperion wasn't interested in any of that. If it was before, then maybe. But after experiencing the power and skills of Hades, he has been far too afraid to participate in this war. Yes, he's a coward. But he'd rather live as a coward than get banished to Tartarus. Across the cosmos, the titans and gods who are allied with Cronus began to move. Legions were summoned. Divine spirits were mobilized. Armies were prepared. They were now going all out to eliminate the rebellion. The fall of Iapetus was not just a loss. It was a declaration. The Titans would no longer tolerate the rebellion. They would strike with everything they had. The war had truly begun. Hades stood still as a vast, overwhelming force washed over him. It started as a whisper, a fragment of something ancient and powerful, slipping into his very essence like a drop of ink into water. Then, in an instant, it became a flood. A divine force unlike anything he had ever felt surged into his being. Iapetus' authority. It coiled around his soul like invisible chains, rewriting the very nature of his existence. It was foreign, yet familiar. He could feel it, the power of Iapetus, the Titan of mortality. A domain that governed the very nature of death and finality. The power to sever. To strike a being once and make them vulnerable. To strike them twice and erase them forever. Hades exhaled slowly, adjusting to the sudden weight of his newfound dominion. His body thrummed with energy, as if he had become something more than he was just moments ago. He flexed his fingers, and for a brief moment, his shadow rippled unnaturally. The world itself seemed to acknowledge the change. The mist that covered the temple shifted. The torches flickered. Even the very air felt heavier. It was his now. All of it. The authority of mortality. The legacy of Iapetus. Hades let out a deep chuckle, his crimson eyes gleaming in the dim light of the temple. In the end, it was almost poetic. A titan of mortality, slain. His authority, taken. And the one who took it? The future ruler of the dead. Hades glanced down at Iapetus' lifeless form, his smirk widening. You were strong, I'll give you that. His voice was smooth, laced with quiet satisfaction. I will offer you my respect and gratitude as a warrior. I will make sure you will enjoy the afterlife. Hades turned away from the corpse, rolling his shoulders as his divinity stabilized. He relished the feeling. Power, truly, is addictive. The battlefield reeked of blood and burned ichor. The remnants of a recent skirmish lay scattered, divine corpses slowly dissipating into energy. Zeus stood among his soldiers, his chest rising and falling steadily as he observed the aftermath. Another victory. A small one, but a victory nonetheless. The guerrilla warfare that his brother, Hades, came up with was incredibly effective and had been going well. Hit fast. Disappear faster. Their small raids had worn down Cryos' forces, forcing the Titan's army into a defensive position. Zeus stared at his joyful soldiers and ordered. All right, quickly ret, a pulse. A great tremor in the divine tapestry of the cosmos. Zeus froze. He felt it, like a star shifting in the sky. Something had changed in the order of the universe. Then, realization dawned on him. He raised his head to look at the direction where Iapetus' temple was at, and instantly, he knew the cause of this shift. The death of a pillar titan, Iapetus. By the hands of his brother, Hades. A moment of silence stretched across Zeus' ranks, and then, laughter. Pure, unfiltered laughter. The gods and divine spirits under his command howled in amusement. Those arrogant bastards finally got what was coming to them. One god laughed, slapping his knee. A titan has fallen. And not just any titan, one of Cronus' pillars, another added. Lord Hades actually did it. The Titan of Mortality is dead. Their voices were filled with triumph, their morale skyrocketing at the revelation. Zeus let out a short chuckle, rubbing his chin. Well, well. He crossed his arms, amusement flickering in his lightning-filled eyes. Looks like my dear brother isn't just sitting back and watching. He's moving forward, just like I expected. He wanted to order his soldiers to prepare for a banquet. But before he could say more, the sky darkened. A deep, starry void swallowed the heavens above, and suddenly, the battlefield was no longer bathed in the glow of the sun. Instead, it was illuminated by countless constellations. The stars themselves shimmered ominously, forming ancient celestial patterns that pulsed with divine energy. Zeus' smile faded. His men stiffened. A great power descended upon the battlefield. And then, he appeared. Crius, the Titan of constellations. Tall and draped in robes that flowed like the night sky itself, his body seemed to be carved from the cosmos. His presence was suffocating, his gaze filled with ancient knowledge and cold fury. Behind him, thousands of gods and divine spirits stood ready for war. All armed. All eager for blood. Zeus' forces instinctively took defensive positions, their earlier laughter vanishing. Crius gazed at them, his expression cold and emotionless. Then, he spoke. His voice was deep and reverberated like the echoes of the universe itself. It seems you already knew, he said simply, his eyes locking onto Zeus. Iapetus has fallen, and I will make sure that will be your first and final victory. A gust of divine pressure rolled through the battlefield, making the very ground tremble. Zeus, however, smirked. He cracked his neck, rolling his shoulders as small sparks of lightning danced along his skin. So dramatic, Zeus mused, a grin forming on his lips. I was just thinking, I needed a real test after 3 years of training. He clenched his fists, and thunder rumbled across the battlefield. Crius narrowed his eyes. You have no chance, child. The Titan raised his hand, and the constellations above shifted. A storm of stars began to descend upon Zeus and his forces. Zeus' grin widened. Let's see about that, old man. And with a crack of lightning, the battle erupted. Poseidon stood at the forefront of his army, his trident resting lazily on his shoulder. Behind him, thousands of gods and divine spirits stood ready, their weapons gleaming under the dark, turbulent sky. They had been marching, searching for any Titan forces to engage. And now, they had found them. Or rather, they had found him. Zeus, the Titan of intellect and the keeper of the celestial axis. Tall and imposing, his eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom and cold calculation. Unlike the powerful Iapetus, the wrathful Crius or the fiery Hyperion, Zeus was always the quiet one, the thinker. The one who always makes plans and acts behind the scenes. His mere presence sent a ripple of unease through Poseidon's troops. This was the Titan who had crushed Poseidon 3 years ago. But this time, things were different. This time, Poseidon was stronger. A smirk stretched across Poseidon's face as he lifted his trident and pointed it directly at Zeus. Finally, you're here. I've been waiting for this moment. The Titan remained motionless, his expression indifferent as he observed Poseidon with those cold, analytical eyes. Have you now? Poseidon's grip on his trident tightened, his divine power flickered. 3 years ago, you humiliated me. But today... His smirk widened. I'm going to pay you back. Zeus tilted his head slightly, his voice calm, almost bored. Only a fool would keep repeating the same thing, expecting a different outcome. The words were like a dagger twisting in Poseidon's pride. He remembered the last battle well. How Zeus had outmaneuvered him. How the Titan had played with him like a child floundering in the deep sea. Poseidon hated that memory. His eyes darkened with resolve. And only a coward would stop trying after failing once. With a loud boom, Poseidon stomped his foot against the ground. The entire battlefield shook violently. Cracks split the earth beneath him, and from the broken land, water gushed forth in massive torrents, flooding the area. The Titan army took a step back as the terrain began to shift in Poseidon's favor. A battlefield of dry land? That wasn't going to happen. Within seconds, the ground was submerged under an expansive ocean. Poseidon's smirk widened as he lifted a hand, feeling the power of the sea pulse through him. Let's see if you can outthink a god who controls the battlefield itself. Zeus remained unimpressed. He raised a single hand, and the skies responded. The clouds split apart, revealing the endless stars above. The constellations shifted, and in an instant, the battlefield was bathed in a mysterious blue light. Poseidon's army tensed. Gravity itself changed. The gods standing on the water's surface suddenly felt their bodies become heavier, as though the very fabric of space was pressing down on them. Some fell into the ocean, struggling under the immense weight. Others gritted their teeth, trying to resist the force. Poseidon's grin faltered for a second as he felt the shift in cosmic balance. Damn it. I forgot Zeus wasn't just an intellectual titan. He was the titan who understood the celestial laws of existence itself. Zeus lowered his hand slightly, and the gravitational force pressed even harder. Poseidon, however, only grinned wider. Not bad, he admitted, his muscles straining slightly against the increased weight. But you're still underestimating me. The waters beneath him suddenly rose violently, twisting into massive, serpent-like forms. Poseidon slammed his trident into the ocean, and the water surged forward, racing toward Zeus and his army like an unstoppable tidal wave. The Titan merely sighed. Predictable. With a wave of his hand, the stars above shifted again, and the waters that had been surging forward suddenly stopped. Frozen. Suspended in midair as if time itself had halted them. Poseidon stared, eyes narrowing. Zeus finally smirked. Your waters are impressive. But they mean nothing if I refuse to let them move. Poseidon's grin never wavered. Instead, he laughed. We'll see about that, you shitty old man. He lifted his trident, and lightning cracked across the stormy sky. The battlefield was about to explode into chaos. A dark and endless corridor stretched infinitely in all directions, void of light, void of warmth. A place outside the realm of gods, beyond the grasp of titans, beyond the perception of mortals. Here, time held no meaning. The path beneath Cronus' feet felt neither solid nor ethereal, it simply was. And as he walked, he felt as though he had been walking for eternity. But he did not stop. His golden eyes burned with purpose, his cloak billowed behind him despite the absence of wind. The silence was suffocating, the weight of this realm pressing on him like an invisible force. Yet, he pressed forward. And finally, he reached the end of the path. There, in the depths of this forsaken abyss, a figure was bound. A man. No, something far greater than a mere man. A colossal, ancient being sat motionless, his body wrapped in countless chains, each shackled to a different pillar that stretched endlessly into the void. His skin was like cracked stone, his once mighty form weathered by time and punishment. But even in this wretched state, his mere presence warped the space around him. And then, Cronus took a single step forward. His voice was calm, yet there was an undeniable weight behind it. Greetings, Father. For a moment, nothing happened. Suddenly, the old man's eyes flickered to life. A deep, immeasurable blue, like the endless sky before the birth of the stars. His gaze pierced through Cronus, ancient and unknowable, carrying the weight of a being who had once ruled before time itself had meaning. Uranus. The first ruler. The primordial sky. The one who had birthed the Titans, and the one whom Cronus had cast down with his own hands. And the one who cursed Cronus to bear the same fate as him. Disappear with the clap of thunder. The battlefield trembled as Zeus unleashed his fury. A roar of thunder tore through the skies, and in the next instant, a torrential storm of lightning rained down upon the Titan's army. Columns of divine electricity struck the ground, reducing entire squadrons of divine spirits to ash. The air crackled with power, the very sky illuminated with the overwhelming might of Zeus. Crius, the Titan of constellations, raised his hand, summoning his own celestial power. From the night sky, the constellations themselves began to move. Luminous lines of divine energy connected the stars, forming giant celestial beasts, Ursa Major, Leo, and Draco, who descended onto the battlefield, roaring as they charged toward Zeus' forces. Crius narrowed his eyes as he observed the storm-wreathed god before him. 3 years ago, this boy was nothing. A mere insect. A child pretending to be a god. But now, this child was a threat. Zeus' strength had grown exponentially, his divine aura so thick that the air itself felt heavier around him. Crius gritted his teeth. Just how are you able to grow to this extent, you whelp? Zeus grinned, his eyes crackling with electricity. As the ruler of the skies, isn't it given for me to grow this strong? Besides, the way you use your authority is terrible. I know someone far better than you at doing it. The Titan's lips curled into a slight frown. He knew someone better than him? That's impossible. He was chosen to be a pillar Titan simply because he was one of the strongest. When it comes to his domain, there is no one who can match him. Wait. There is one. Astra, Zeus appeared right in front of him. What? Crius barely had time to react before Zeus grabbed his face in one swift, violent motion. The impact shattered the air, a sonic boom rippling through the battlefield as Zeus launched himself upward, dragging Crius along with him. The Titan's body whipped through the air like a ragdoll, the force of Zeus' grip distorting the space around them. Crius struggled, but Zeus' grip was like an unbreakable vice. In mere moments, they broke through the clouds. Then, they went past the troposphere. Higher, higher, until they reached the boundary of the world. The exosphere. A place where no mortal, no lesser god could exist. Where the Earth's laws of reality began to crumble, and only the most powerful of gods and titans could withstand the divine pressure. A place once ruled by the primordial god Uranus, but has long since become unstable after his death. Crius' body hovered in the void, the stars of the cosmos shining around them, an endless sea of constellations and celestial wonders. Zeus released his grip, letting Crius float in the void. Then, he crossed his arms and smirked. If we fought down there, it would have been bad for my troops. His eyes glowed like miniature suns. But here, we can go all out. Crius remained silent. His celestial eyes studied Zeus, his mind racing. How did he do that? How did he grab me? How did he move so fast that I couldn't even react? Just what sort of training did he went through to be this strong? Crius clenched his fists. Then, slowly, he began to smile. Interesting. You said you know someone whose authority is better than mine? What a coincidence, I happen to know one too. He's just way too reclusive, I completely forgot about him. Zeus cracked his neck. Does the one you're talking about have a really sexy wife and breathtakingly beautiful daughter? Last I heard, yes. Then we're probably talking about the same person. Crius smirked maliciously. Good. I happen to have a score to settle with that guy. The stars around them shimmered. Constellations shifted. And the Titan of constellations let out a slow, exhaled breath. Come at me, God of Thunder. His voice carried the weight of an entire cosmos. Let us see how much you learned from him. Oh, I will show you all right. Zeus smirked, extending his arm to the side and gripping the empty space. A beat later, his divine weapon, Thunderbolt, appeared in his hand. Electricity danced along his skin, his fiery eyes gleaming with divine energy. The mere presence of his power caused ripples in the cosmic fabric. Crius, the Titan of constellations, remained still, his expression unreadable. His body pulsed with the power of the stars, and his celestial robes fluttered as the constellations behind him shifted and aligned. Then, a spark. In a single instant, Zeus moved. The sound of a deafening thunderclap echoed through the void as he disappeared, a streak of golden lightning tearing through the darkness of space. Crius' eyes widened. Fast. He barely had time to react. Boom. A fist wreathed in divine lightning crashed into his jaw, sending him hurtling backward. The impact sent shockwaves through space, distorting the very stars. Crius gritted his teeth as he twisted in the air, regaining control. You really are strong. Crius admitted, rubbing his jaw. Zeus grinned. Naturally. I am the god of the sky, the king of the gods. Crius narrowed his eyes. You really are arrogant for a mere godling. Zeus didn't deny it. He is arrogant. So what? He has enough power to be arrogant. With a flick of his wrist, the thunderbolt hummed with power, crackling with lightning so intense that it burned through the fabric of reality. And then, with a grin, he threw it. The moment he did, the very space ignited, turning into a storm of divine flames and plasma. The thunderbolt pierced through space itself, distorting the constellations as it roared toward Crius. The Titan reacted instantly. The stars around him shone brighter, and in an instant, they rearranged, forming a barrier of pure celestial energy in front of him. Zeus' attack struck, and the cosmos screamed. A deafening explosion of light erupted as the thunderbolt collided with the celestial barrier. The very fabric of space-time rippled, and countless stars were extinguished in the resulting shockwave. Crius gritted his teeth. The power behind his strikes. It's absurd. But he wasn't done yet. The Titan's eyes burned with cosmic fire. Don't you dare underestimate a Titan. The moment he said that, the constellations shifted again. The stars behind him merged, forming something massive, a celestial spear forged from the very essence of the cosmos. Crius grabbed it, eyes glaring viciously at Zeus as he hurled the spear towards him. The moment it left his hand, the spear shattered space itself. Zeus' eyes widened. The attack was faster than anything he had ever seen. But he had fought fast enemies before. So, he reacted. Lightning erupted from his body, and he twisted, dodging at the last possible second. Or so he thought. The moment the celestial spear passed him, space itself rippled and bent, and suddenly, the spear was behind him, curving toward his back. What the hell? Surprised, he wasn't able to react as the spear pierced through his side, burning with the cold fury of 1,000 stars. Gah! Zeus screamed, ichor spilling into the void. Crius smirked. Hurts, doesn't it? Zeus gritted his teeth. His wound burned, but he had felt worse. The pain of humiliation and defeat that burned him 3 years ago was far worse than what he's feeling now. With a savage roar, he clenched his fist, and the lightning around his body exploded outward, turning the darkness of space into a sea of golden thunder. The cosmic spear disintegrated. And Zeus charged again. This time, Crius was ready. They clashed, lightning against stars, God against Titan. Each strike shattered stars, each movement distorted space. Zeus was fast. Crius was precise. Zeus aimed to overwhelm. Crius aimed to endure. Lightning burned through the cosmos as Zeus swung his thunderbolt, the power behind each strike causing the heavens to tremble. Crius dodged and countered, striking with the precision of a master, his celestial spear weaving through the storm like a shooting star. Zeus' muscles screamed with pain. Crius' endurance began to falter. They were evenly matched. But then, Zeus decided to end it. He took a deep breath, ignoring the pain, ignoring the exhaustion. And he summoned everything he had. Let's see if you can handle this. Crius felt it before he saw it. The stars began to tremble. The constellations shifted uncontrollably. And the cosmos itself seemed to bend under Zeus' will. Then, a solar storm ignited. The old man was annoying, but he's really a great teacher. Zeus grinned as the solar storm burned with cosmic fury. The sky is more than just lightning and rain. Crius' eyes widened in horror. The fabric of space was burning. Countless solar flares erupted, twisting and writhing like serpents of fire. A storm of pure, raw energy, fueled by the might of 1,000 dying stars, descended upon him. Crius tried to escape, but it was too late. The storm swallowed him whole. For a moment, he could feel it. The heat of 1,000,000,000 suns. The weight of the cosmos crushing him. And then, nothing. Crius, Titan of constellations, was gone. Erased in the storm of Zeus making. The battle was over. But, Zeus himself was barely standing. His body was covered in wounds, his divine ichor drifting into space. His breathing was ragged, his vision blurred. He staggered in space, panting. Damn it, that took more out of me than I thought. But he had won. And as he stared at the fading remnants of Crius, he grinned. A vast ocean stretched endlessly, swallowing the remnants of land, the sky itself darkened by the sheer volume of water that Poseidon had conjured. His trident gleamed with divine power, pulsating with the rhythm of the sea, while titanic waves crashed around him, forming a roaring aquatic storm that threatened to erase all in its path. Poseidon stood in the center of the storm, his skin shimmering under the eerie glow of the water. His eyes glowed green, filled with the might of the boundless ocean. Across from him, Zeus remained completely calm. Despite being at the center of an enemy's domain, the Titan of intelligence showed no sign of panic. His hair floated gently around him, his piercing gaze studying everything: Poseidon's stance, the way the water moved, and the speed at which the tide shifted.
Everything. He was calculating, analyzing. It was then that Poseidon raised his trident. The ocean responded. A massive column of water surged upward, carrying entire islands with it, the sheer pressure enough to crush any being caught within. Zeus remained unfazed. He controls the sea well, but he thinks like a brute. Same as 3 years ago. With a slight movement, he tried to fly up, intending to escape the rising ocean. But Poseidon had predicted that. The sea swallowed him whole. Millions of tons of water crashed upon Zeus, dragging him into the abyss of Poseidon's domain. Poseidon grinned. Got him. But then, something changed. Even through the crushing water, even in the depths of the abyss, Zeus did not struggle. Instead, he sighed. I really don't want to do this because it makes me feel like a brute. But I must end this fight as soon as possible. His eyes burned. Then, he activated his other authority. The ocean trembled. Poseidon felt it immediately. What the? The water split apart. It wasn't Poseidon who willed it. The sea itself rebelled against its master. The impossible had happened. The entire battlefield, the endless ocean that Poseidon had created, was being torn asunder. Poseidon barely had time to process his shock before the world suddenly tilted. Gravity itself shifted, and Poseidon was flung backward. The hell! The force was immense. The sky itself turned sideways, and for a moment, it was as if the very laws of nature had been rewritten. Poseidon's feet scraped against the newly exposed seabed, his trident digging into the ground as he tried to steady himself. But it was useless. The entire planet was shifting. What the hell is this power? Then, winter arrived. A deafening howl of icy winds erupted from the heavens, so fierce that it carried the cries of nature itself. The sea, Poseidon's domain, his greatest weapon, froze instantly. A single moment. That was all it took. The endless ocean that had once swallowed the battlefield was no longer an ocean. It was an expanse of ice. Poseidon stood, his body tense, his breath visible in the freezing air. His hands trembled. It wasn't because of the cold, but he was in shock. This wasn't normal ice. This was a divine phenomenon. Even as the Lord of the Seas, Poseidon felt it. His power was being suppressed. How? Zeus finally spoke. I control the celestial axis. The very foundation of movement, gravity, and the cycles of the world. With a thought, I can tilt reality itself, command the seasons, and dictate the forces that govern the universe. His voice was calm, almost bored. My brothers like to make fun of me because I always prefer fighting with my intellect, but I really don't want to look like a brute. His eyes glowed as he took a step forward. But this time I really don't have any choice. You godlings have really become such a threat that must be eliminated immediately. Another tilt. Poseidon stumbled as the world shifted again, his balance thrown off by the erratic changes in gravity. It wasn't just the battlefield, the planet itself was Zeus' weapon. Poseidon gritted his teeth. So this is the power of a titan. He had trained for 3 years, endured countless hardships, and pushed himself beyond his limits. And yet, here, standing before him, was a being who wasn't even breaking a sweat. The realization angered him. TCH. He slammed his foot into the frozen ground, shattering the ice beneath him. All right then, Poseidon growled, his voice echoing through the vast, frozen wasteland. A fight of brute force? Let's see how you handle this. The frozen ocean quaked as Poseidon lifted his trident, and immediately the earth trembled. Poseidon's trident struck the frozen ground, sending violent tremors across the battlefield. The sound of cracking ice echoed like a chorus of destruction, and in an instant, the once solid expanse of frozen ocean began to fracture apart. Zeus, still standing tall, narrowed his eyes. An earthquake. A second later, boom. The ground shattered like glass beneath his feet. The Titan immediately realized Poseidon's intent. So you're more than just a child playing with water. Massive chasm-like cracks spread across the frozen battlefield, swallowing chunks of ice into the black abyss below. The world quaked violently, and everything was shifting, not from Zeus' celestial axis, but from Poseidon's raw destructive power. Zeus adjusted his stance, focusing on counteracting the sudden instability. But Poseidon wasn't done. Ha!
I've used my authority over the sea so much everyone forgot I am also the god of earthquake." With a mighty heave, he swung his trident, and the ice immediately exploded. "I am Poseidon, the earth shaker." Zeus was forced to leap back as the ground beneath him erupted into a geyser of water, surging toward the heavens like a tidal wave. Poseidon smirked, watching the Titan move. "I will not let what happened 3 years ago happen again. This time, I will crush you." With a powerful leap, he rushed toward Zeus, spinning his trident with masterful precision. The air boomed from his sheer speed, and in a blink, he was face to face with his opponent. Try keeping up with this. Poseidon unleashed a rapid barrage of thrusts, each blow powerful enough to shatter mountains. His movements were fluid, like the waves of the ocean. Yet each strike carried the weight of an earthquake. Zeus dodged, parried, and countered, but Poseidon kept pressing forward. For the first time in their battle, Zeus struggled. Poseidon was getting faster. Stronger. Zeus' calculations, which once predicted the fight's flow with absolute certainty, were failing. He gritted his teeth, raising his arms. A celestial barrier materialized around him, shimmering with divine energy. Poseidon's trident slammed into it, and it shattered instantly. Zeus' eyes widened. Ridiculous. How was that possible? Poseidon didn't give him time to recover. The god of the sea roared, stomping his foot on the ground. Boom! A massive tremor sent shockwaves rippling through the ice, causing entire sections of it to collapse into the abyss below. Zeus, despite his power, was thrown off balance for half a second. Half a second too long. Poseidon seized the moment. He launched forward, swinging his trident in a devastating arc aimed straight for Zeus' chest. Zeus barely had time to react. He shifted the celestial axis, trying to redirect Poseidon's momentum, but Poseidon had already accounted for that. With a brutal twist, Poseidon slammed his foot onto the ice and stopped himself mid-charge, using the sudden halt to amplify the force of his next strike. Crack! The blow sent Zeus flying. He crashed into the frozen sea, the ice around him cratering upon impact. Poseidon laughed. "What's wrong, O mighty Titan? You've gotten sloppy. Is it because you can no longer find any chance of winning in this fight?" Zeus slowly rose from the wreckage. His expression was still as calm as ever. Not in the slightest. He exhaled, his eyes flickering with new resolve. "I had hoped to avoid this," Zeus admitted. "But I can see now, you are not an opponent I can defeat with restraint." Poseidon narrowed his eyes. "What, are you saying this isn't even your final form?" Zeus lifted his hand, and the heavens themselves responded. The sky twisted. The constellations above shifted out of alignment. Poseidon felt a pull, a gravitational force far greater than anything he had felt before. "I will no longer hold back." Zeus' voice was calm, yet absolute. "I will show you the full extent of my authority." Poseidon braced himself. Then, the world tilted again. But this time, it wasn't just the battlefield. It was everything. Poseidon felt it, his sense of direction shattering, his weight shifting in unnatural ways. One moment, he was standing, the next, he was falling. But falling where? It was impossible to tell. The axis of reality had been completely severed. Poseidon gritted his teeth. "Damn it! I'll crush everything here then." With a roar, he slammed his trident downward, and boom! A massive earthquake erupted from beneath him, sending shockwaves so powerful that they forced reality to stabilize for a split second. That was all Poseidon needed. He shot forward like a torpedo, weaving through the collapsing space, aiming straight for Zeus. Zeus reacted immediately, sending a wave of gravitational force to crush Poseidon mid-flight. But Poseidon kept going. He spun his trident, cutting through the gravity like a blade through water. For someone with such a powerful domain, you have no idea how to use it at all. So much for your intelligence. And in the next instant, Poseidon threw his trident. The divine weapon pierced through Zeus' gravity field, heading straight for him. Zeus barely dodged, but Poseidon was already moving again. He slammed his foot down, and the battlefield trembled once more. Cracks spread beneath Zeus' feet. And then, water erupted from below. A hidden reservoir of the ocean Poseidon had buried beneath the ice, had just been released. It engulfed Ceus completely. For the first time, Ceus looked genuinely surprised. Poseidon grinned. If someone who actually knows how to fight were to have your authority, even I wouldn't be confident in winning. The ocean dragged Ceus down, deeper, deeper into the abyss. Ceus struggled, shifting the celestial axis, trying to break free, but it was too late. Poseidon had sealed his fate. You lose. Ceus' eyes burned one last time before the darkness soon consumed him. The Titan vanished into the abyss, lost to the endless depths of the sea. Poseidon exhaled as he clutched his side, before spitting out a mouthful of golden ichor. The shift in reality earlier completely messed up his innards, and he was sure all of his internal organs were either destroyed or severely damaged. If he didn't force himself to hold on, he would have died then and there. But for now, he had won. And that's more than enough. Hades sat atop the ruined debris of Iapetus' temple. He was staring at his hand, clenching and opening it, feeling the newfound power that courses through his being. The power of Iapetus is something he had long since coveted. The power to turn immortal into mortal. To put an end to eternity. The wind howled, carrying the scent of destruction. He could feel the pulse of the world shifting, the balance of power tilting in their favor. He had felt the death of Crius and the defeat of Ceus, leaving only Hyperion as the last Pillar Titan that can still participate in this war. But Hades was sure that the wounds he suffered from him 3 years ago were still affecting him at this very moment. Now, only Atlas is left before we can get to Cronus. Suddenly, a dark purple mist swallowed the temple. Hades simply stared at it, knowing full well whose power this mist belongs to. Just then, a sea of divine power erupted around him as Hecate, Camp, and thousands of gods and divine spirits materialized from the mist before it dissipated. Hecate stepped forward first, her eyes glowing with respect and reverence. Lord Hades. Camp followed beside her, her scarlet hair flowing like liquid fire, her barely covered form drenched with blood. She licked a smear of golden ichor from her fingertips, grinning viciously. The gods and divine spirits knelt before Hades, their voices echoing across the ruined battlefield. All hail Hades, Slayer of Iapetus, Lord of the Underworld. Hades remained silent for a moment, his piercing eyes scanning the kneeling warriors. These were underworld gods who had sworn allegiance to him after seeing his power. All of them were once under the command of many superior underworld gods. But after Hades gained full control of Underworld, all of them now serve under him. Hecate, standing before him, gave a small, knowing smile. It is time, she said. With the defeat of 3 Pillar Titans, Cronus' forces are surely in chaos. The Titans feel their impending doom. We must strike now and end this war once and for all. Camp flicked her long, jagged claws, ichor dripping from their tips. Mount Othries will be drenched in blood soon enough. Just say the word, and I'll carve my way through their defenses. Hades exhaled slowly and stood. The air trembled around him. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, toward Mount Othries, the seat of Cronus' rule. He could see it, the monstrous fortress of the Titans standing tall, defiant against the inevitable. His fingers curled into a fist. Then we move. Call the underworld river gods. His voice was steady, absolute. We march for Mount Othries. This war ends with Cronus' fall. Hecate nodded, then raised her hands, weaving magic through the air. Her voice echoed across the land, through rivers, mountains, and the depths of the underworld itself, conveying the orders of Hades. In different parts of the underworld, where the 5 underworld river gods stood at the ready, Hades' orders echoed. The king has spoken. And none dared to disobey. The underworld trembled as the war drums of the gods echoed through the vast expanse of the land. The Titans, once unchallenged in their rule, now faced the inevitable end of their dominion. Hades had spoken. And the 5 underworld river gods have responded. Each of them, bound to the rivers they governed, heard the call as if Hades himself had whispered directly into their souls. This was not merely just a war, it was a reckoning. Now was the time to prove their worth, their loyalty to the true ruler of the underworld. Acheron stood at the edge of a ruined battlefield, his bronze armor stained with blackened ichor. The river of pain, his domain, flowed behind him, its cursed waters carrying the agony of those who had perished without honor. At the sound of Hades' command, Acheron's golden eyes narrowed with fierce determination. He had always been a warrior first, a deity second. His domain did not just represent pain, it embodied the strength to endure it. He clenched his fist around his massive, twin-pronged spear, then turned toward the thousands of divine warriors under his command, beings forged in suffering, yet unyielding. "The time has come," Acheron said, his voice deep and unwavering. "We have bled. We have endured. Now, we fight." His soldiers roared, pounding their shields in a rhythmic thunder, their weapons glinting under the blood-red sky. Acheron smirked. "For Lord Hades. For the Underworld." With that, he turned, leading his army forward. The ground split beneath their march, the weight of destiny pressing upon them. Far across from Acheron, where the winds carried the anguished cries of the damned, Cocytus stood upon a vast, frozen wasteland. The spirits of the forsaken wandered aimlessly, their voices a chorus of eternal grief. Cocytus exhaled slowly, his breath turning to frost in the air. "Lord Hades has called," he murmured. His voice was quiet, almost melancholic. "And we shall answer." A lone soldier approached, kneeling. "Lord Cocytus, shall we move?" Cocytus turned his piercing, ice-blue eyes upon his followers, spirits clad in darkened steel, their very bodies encased in layers of eternal frost. They did not flinch from his gaze. They had all suffered. They had all lost. But now, they would fight. He lifted his spear of frozen despair, its edge crackling with ice. "Pain has already shaped us. Now, let it shape the Titan's end." At his command, the frozen land itself split open, releasing an icy mist that swallowed his army whole. As they moved forward, the temperature of the battlefield plummeted, the chilling embrace of Cocytus spreading death and silence. A sea of flames raged as Phlegethon stood upon a blackened battlefield, his very presence radiating unbearable heat. His river burned with divine fire, a punishment for those who dared defy the laws of the Underworld. Phlegethon grinned savagely. He could feel it, the power shift, the changing tides of war. The end of the Titans and the rise of the Olympians. "Our king commands," he bellowed, his voice a roaring inferno. "And the Titans shall burn." His army, composed of flame-clad warriors and divine spirits whose very souls had been forged in his molten waters, erupted in cheers. The ground beneath them glowed red-hot, melting into lava from their sheer presence. Phlegethon raised his massive, burning greatsword, letting its flames stretch toward the heavens. "I am the edge of the blade. I am the cut that ends foes. I am the wrath that topples armies. My brothers, will you fight with me? Fight. Fight. Fight." Phlegethon grinned. "I feel your faith, brothers. But it must be stronger. You are sons of flames. Warriors of Hades. You call yourselves champions of the king of the Underworld. He calls upon you now to lend me your wrath. Lend me your hate. Lend me your fire." He took a deep breath. Praise him. Praise Hades, king of the Underworld. Praise Hades, king of the Underworld. The army of Phlegethon moved like a rolling wildfire, unstoppable, ravenous, and fueled by their loyalty to Hades. In a realm of mist and stillness, Lethe watched as the message of Hades resonated through her waters. Unlike the others, she did not raise her voice or call upon her warriors with grand speeches. She did not need to. Her presence alone was a command. The thousands of divine spirits under her command were silent, their expressions empty, unreadable. They had long since forgotten fear, forgotten hesitation, forgotten weakness. Now, they were simply cold, emotionless warriors that absolutely obeyed every command of their leader. Lethe, her silver hair flowing in the mist, raised a single hand. The air around her shimmered, the very fabric of reality warping. "We go," she whispered. Without a single sound, her forces vanished into the mist, silent, unseen, yet inevitable. Styx stood at the very edge of her domain, the blackened river upon which even the gods swore unbreakable oaths. She gripped the hilt of her sword, its blade dark as the void, forged from the very essence of her waters. Her warriors, the most disciplined, the most unwavering, stood at attention. There were no cheers. No words needed to be spoken. They had already sworn themselves to Hades. And a vow made upon Styx was unbreakable. She lifted her blade. For the Lord of the Underworld. The warriors of Styx stepped forward, their formation flawless, their purpose absolute. Across the world, the 5 underworld river gods moved as one. Acheron's unstoppable tide of warriors, Cocytus' silent storm of death, Phlegethon's raging inferno, Lethe's ghostly army of forgotten souls, and Styx's unyielding force of sworn warriors. They converged toward a single point, Mount Othrys. Hades stood, waiting for them. His dark cloak billowed as he gazed upon the towering Mount Orthes along with the grand temple of Cronus. A dark purple aura flickered around him, causing ripples in space. Hecate stood beside him, her lamp glowing eerily. Camp grinned in excitement, her claws twitching in anticipation. They could all feel it. The end was near. The age of the Titans was crumbling. And Hades will be the one to end it. Zeus groaned as he opened his eyes. His body felt surprisingly light, as if the weight of exhaustion had been stripped from him. He blinked, adjusting to the golden rays of sunlight filtering through the fractured clouds. Slowly, he sat up, only to see a familiar figure kneeling beside him. Demeter. She held her twin sickles, their curved edges gleaming with faint traces of divine energy. The aura of healing still lingered around her hands, the last remnants of her divinity fading into the air. "You're awake." Demeter exhaled in relief. She wiped a bit of sweat from her brow, but her expression remained calm and composed. Zeus flexed his fingers, rolling his shoulders. He felt rejuvenated. Like he wasn't just pushed to his limits in a battle. "What happened?" he asked, his voice still raspy from the previous battle. "You passed out." She replied, "I guess Cryas is too much for you to handle without suffering grave injuries." Zeus hummed. Indeed, he had pushed himself to the absolute limits and only come out on top because of the power taught to him by Astraeus. "What's the situation?" Demeter stood, her sharp hazel eyes meeting his. Hades has already made his move. He called his forces and is heading straight toward Mount Othrys. The final battle is about to begin. Zeus narrowed his eyes. Hades didn't waste any time. Well, of course he wouldn't. Hades was always the one who acted with precision. He wasn't one to delay things that could be done at the moment. Lightning crackled around Zeus as he pushed himself to his feet, shaking off the lingering soreness from his body. "Then there's no time to waste," he declared, stretching his arms as sparks of electricity danced across his fingers. "We're heading there, too." Demeter nodded. Zeus thought that despite how she always looked so carefree and had flowers for brains, she was always so reliable. Just then, Zeus turned to fully take in their surroundings, and that was when he finally noticed the sheer number of warriors around them. Thousands upon thousands. Not just his own legion of gods and divine spirits, but Demeter's forces as well. The air was thick with power, a living storm of divine energy waiting to be unleashed. Their gazes were locked onto him, waiting for his command. Zeus let out a slow breath. This was it. The moment before the decisive battle. Zeus stepped forward, placing himself atop a large rock to overlook the gathered warriors. "Listen well." His voice boomed like thunder, silencing the murmurs among the ranks. "We have fought. We have bled. And we have lost many of our brothers and sisters in this war. The Titans believed they could hold their rule forever, that their power was absolute." His eyes burned, scanning the faces of every god and divine spirit present. But they were wrong. A murmur spread through the army, growing louder with every second. "We have proven them wrong. With every battle, we have taken back what was stolen from us. With every strike, we have shown them that their time is over." His voice surged, filled with the fury of a storm. Hades has called his forces. He marches toward Mount Othrys at this very moment. The end of the war is here. And we will not be left behind. The warriors roared. Shields pounded against the ground. Weapons clashed in anticipation. Zeus raised his hand, lightning crackling violently in his palm. "No more waiting. No more hiding. We will tear through the Titan ranks, break through their gates, and bring down Cronus himself." The sky above them trembled. The wind howled. The very air burned with divine energy. We march to victory. We march to history. We march to the end of this age. The army exploded with cries of war. Some raised their weapons to the sky. Some slammed their fists against their chests, declaring their undying loyalty.
Zeus lowered his arm, turning to Demeter, who was smirking slightly. "You certainly know how to rile them up," she said. Zeus grinned. "Of course. They need to believe in something bigger than themselves. That's what leaders do." Demeter shook her head. "Then lead them, brother." Zeus stepped forward, his body glowing with divine power. "My soldiers, move out." And like a crashing storm, they marched. Poseidon sat on a massive boulder, his trident resting across his knees. His chest rose and fell heavily, his divinity nearly drained after the grueling battle against Zeus. The battlefield around him was eerily silent now. The remnants of frozen ocean and shattered earth were all that remained of their clash. The sky was still fractured, a testament to the sheer power that had been unleashed here. Just then, Poseidon's exhaustion vanished in an instant as he felt it. A surge of divine energy, like an unrelenting tidal wave sweeping across the land. The underworld forces were on the move. Hades and his legions were marching towards Mount Othrys. Then, another presence. Lightning crackled in the distance. The sky rumbled. Zeus was following after Hades and heading towards Mount Othrys. Poseidon could feel his brother's power, unmistakable and vast, surging forward like an unstoppable storm. Demeter's essence was there too, steady as the spring, guiding their legions with unwavering resolve. Poseidon exhaled sharply, gripping his trident as he forced himself to his feet. His soldiers, the gods and divine spirits under his command, were already gathered around him. Some were injured, others weary, but their eyes burned with determination. They were waiting for his command. A smirk appeared on his lips as he rolled his shoulders. "It seems like those brothers of mine didn't wait for me, huh?" He chuckled, though his tone was edged with irritation. "Typical. They probably think they can win this without me." The soldiers around him smirked, shaking their heads. "Lord Poseidon, what are your orders?" one of them asked, stepping forward. Poseidon's smirk widened. "Isn't it obvious?" He stabbed his trident into the ground, causing the very earth beneath them to tremble. "We're heading to Mount Othrys. If my brothers are going to bring down Cronus, then I sure as hell won't be left behind." The warriors erupted into cheers. "Off with Cronus' head. Let the Titans fall." Just then, a powerful aura approached. A legion of gods and divine spirits appeared from the horizon, moving with disciplined precision. Their banners fluttered in the wind, their divine power pulsing in perfect unison. At their forefront, a lone figure stood, her presence regal and commanding. Hera. Her long, flowing hair cascaded behind her like a river of silver, and her piercing eyes were sharp as a blade. Her divine mirror, the divine weapon crafted by the Cyclops themselves, floated around her. Poseidon turned to face her fully, eyes narrowing. "Hera." She regarded him with a calm, calculating gaze. "Poseidon." The air between them was heavy with unsaid words. But there was no need for speeches. No need for declarations. They both knew why they were here. Poseidon glanced at her weapon, watching as the mirror glowed faintly, reflecting something even he couldn't comprehend. "I guess we're bringing all our forces to Cronus?" Hera simply nodded. "Aside from Hestia, who remained with Mother in the Underworld, all of us are here. There is no point in holding back any longer. The Titans must fall." Poseidon chuckled, twirling his trident. "Naturally. Let's make sure to tear them down and make them kneel before us." Hera said nothing, but her eyes flickered with something dangerous. Poseidon shivered, knowing full well just how dangerous this woman is. She might not be as strong as him, but he will definitely suffer if he pisses her off. And then, without another word, they marched. Side by side. Legions upon legions of gods and divine spirits thundered forward, their footsteps shaking the heavens. The fall of the Titans is nigh. At the foot of Mount Othrys, the very heart of the Titans' dominion, a lone figure sat atop one of the ancient, colossal stairs leading up to the mountain's peak. Atlas. His massive form was draped in gold and obsidian armor, each plate engraved with constellations, shifting and burning like the cosmos itself. His face was unreadable, his expression locked in stoic contemplation. In his right hand, a monstrous club, Pelasgion Omen, was buried deep into the cracked stone below him. The weapon pulsed with power, distorting the very air around it. Gravity wavered, and space twisted,
as if the very presence of Atlas threatened to crush reality itself. And behind him, a force unlike any seen before. Tens of thousands of gods and divine spirits stood in perfect formation. Their golden armor gleamed under the dim light, each soldier adorned with the sigil of the Titans. Their spears were raised, shields locked together, their presence alone enough to make the very sky tremble. Their gazes were unwavering, their divine energy thrumming like a single, unified heartbeat. Atlas did not need to look back at them. He could feel their resolve. This was the final line. The last, unshakable wall of the Titanomachy. Mount Athres must not fall. Atlas exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around his club. He could feel it. A storm of divinity, approaching from the horizon like an apocalyptic tide. The rebels were coming. Hades. His underworld legions were commanded with ruthless precision. A force of death itself, unrelenting and absolute. Zeus. His thunderous legions, burning with the very essence of the sky. The prodigal son, the storm of change. Poseidon. His armies of the seas, crashing forward like an unbreakable tide, carrying the weight of the deep with them. And now, Hera, Demeter, and countless others. All of them are marching towards here, all with the same intent to bring an end to the current order. Atlas sighed. So here they come. He slowly rose to his feet, the mountain itself groaning under his weight. His armor crackled with divine might, and his presence alone sent a crushing pressure through the air. One of his captains stepped forward, clad in black iron, his spear resting against his shoulder. Lord Atlas, shall we prepare for engagement? Atlas did not answer immediately. He turned his gaze to the clouded horizon. In the far distance, a wall of gods surged forward, their banners high, their power undeniable. Atlas slowly lifted his club, resting it over his shoulder. Hold the line, he commanded, his voice as deep and immovable as the world itself. Let them come. Let them crash against us like waves against the cliffs. His eyes burned with determination. And then, he tightened his grip. We will break them. A force of tens of thousands of divine warriors, gods, divine spirits, and divine beings, stood assembled before the towering stairs of Mount Athres. Their combined divinity surged across the battlefield like a rising tide, the sheer force of their presence making the very air tremble. At their forefront stood the mightiest of them all. Hades, lord of the underworld. Zeus, the god of thunder. Poseidon, the god of the seas. Hera, the goddess of marriage. Demeter, the goddess of harvest. And behind them, their legions, their banners raised high, their weapons gleaming with divine might. At the top of the stairs, waiting in silent defiance, was Atlas. The Titan of endurance sat motionless, resting his colossal club on the ground. His eyes burned with quiet intensity as he gazed down at the approaching army, his armor radiating raw power. Despite the overwhelming numbers before him, he remained unshaken. On either side of Atlas stood Adonis and Lelantos, two formidable titans, their strength second only to the four-pillar titans. Adonis, the titan of unyielding force, whose mere presence made the ground quake. His arms were crossed over his chest, his crimson armor etched with the scars of countless battles. Lelantos, the titan of stealth and the unseen wind, stood with his great bow resting against his shoulder. His form flickered like a mirage, his power making him nearly imperceptible. His cold gaze locked onto the approaching gods with quiet calculation. The two titans could feel the weight of what was coming. But none spoke. And at this moment, Hades took a step forward. With that single movement, the world cracked. A massive shockwave erupted across the battlefield, flattening the ground beneath him and sending tremors through the air. The sky above darkened, as if reality itself struggled to bear the weight of the moment. Atlas slowly stood, lifting his club onto his shoulder. His expression remained unchanged, but his golden aura flared to life, colliding with Hades' dark energy. The heavens split open. Mountains crumbled. The earth screamed as the two forces clashed. It was as if the cosmos themselves rebelled against their existence. Adonis gritted his teeth. Even for him, the pressure was immense. Lelantos clenched his fist, his form flickering, barely holding his ground. A moment later, both titans stepped forward, their combined energy reinforcing Atlas' aura, just to counteract Hades' mere presence. For a brief moment, the battlefield teetered on the brink of oblivion. They stared at each other, their eyes conveying more than mere words. Eventually, as if coming to an understanding, they retracted their power. The world stabilized. The sky remained cracked, but the immediate threat of destruction had passed. Atlas rolled his shoulders, as if shaking off the weight of Hades' power. His eyes locked onto the Lord of the Underworld. "You can pass." His voice was calm and unwavering. The Olympian stiffened in surprise, but Hades remained still. Atlas exhaled slowly. "There is no point in trying to stop you," he admitted. "We cannot beat you." He then raised his club and stabbed it into the ground. "Instead, we will defeat your siblings and your army. Then, we will march to aid Lord Cronus." His gaze swept across the Olympians before him. "And when that happens, you will fall." Hades stared at him and simply ignored his words. Then, without sparing another glance, his black cloak billowing behind him, he ascended the ancient, crumbling stairs of Mount Othries. Each step he took sent ripples of dark energy through the stone, and the oppressive aura surrounding him forced the Titan soldiers to instinctively move aside, their very instincts screaming at them not to stand in his path. None dared to block his way. A faint mist flickered behind him, almost imperceptible. Hecate had vanished into a veil of purple smoke, silently following him. Though unseen, her presence remained, a specter of sorcery lurking just beyond the edge of perception. Atlas watched them go, his eyes narrowing, hesitating. He wanted to stop Hecate, but doing so would take too much time and would injure him. So in the end, he made no move to stop them. Instead, he turned his attention back to the Olympians. His golden aura surged, twisting the air around him as he pointed his colossal club forward. "You will not take another step further." Then, like a signal, he roared, "Death to the rebels! Hail Cronus! Death to the rebels! Hail Cronus!" The moment his words rang out, the Titan's army roared, tens of thousands of gods and divine spirits erupting forward like an avalanche of destruction. Their weapons blazed with divine energy, their armor gleaming under the fractured sky. Zeus and Poseidon did not hesitate. "Death to Cronus! My soldiers! Push forward!" The army of gods behind them roared as they threw themselves at the opposing side. Zeus threw his arm forward, and the very sky split apart. Thunder roared in response to his will, as massive bolts of lightning came crashing down upon the Titan's army. Poseidon stomped his foot, and the ground shattered. Cracks spread like veins, and from them erupted torrents of seawater, an entire ocean conjured from nothing, crashing into the enemy ranks with the force of a divine tsunami. It was chaos. The two colossal armies clashed, and the very land trembled beneath them. Camp, standing among the front lines, threw her head back and laughed. "I have waited for this," she roared, her crimson hair billowing in the storm of divinity. "I'll burn you all to cinders." In the next instant, her body began to twist, her limbs stretching, bones cracking as she morphed into her true form. A massive red dragon, her scales gleaming like molten fire, erupted into existence. Her wings, large enough to blot out the battlefield below, unfurled with a single movement, and with a single sweep of her tail, she sent dozens of Titan soldiers flying. With a guttural growl, she exhaled, and a storm of fire swallowed the battlefield whole. Among this chaos, the key battles began. Adonis, the Titan of unyielding force, turned as Demeter approached him, her two sickles glowing with divine light. The ground cracked beneath them, the force of their power twisting the battlefield itself. Lelantos, the Titan of the unseen wind, remained still as Hera stepped forward, her divine mirror floating in orbit around her. They stared at one another for a brief moment, their divinities colliding. Lelantos' form flickered, shifting between reality and illusion, but Hera remained as composed as ever. "You won't be hiding from me," she declared, as her mirror shimmered, revealing every possible movement he could make. Meanwhile, the 5 underworld river gods, leading their own elite legions, pushed forward, their sights set on Cronus' temple. They don't want to waste time fighting here. They must assist their king as soon as possible. The armies of the dead surged, their war cries echoing like a chorus of the damned. As the battlefield burned around them, Atlas turned to face Zeus and Poseidon. The two Olympians stood before him, their weapons crackling with divine might. Atlas exhaled slowly, shifting his colossal club. His body radiates power, so much so that even Zeus and Poseidon doubted if they could win this alone. "I hope you two are prepared," he said, his voice like rolling thunder.
Because you won't leave this battlefield alive. Zeus hid his worries and simply smirked. We'll see about that. Poseidon twirled his trident, the air around him warping with power. Let's find out who breaks first. However, before Zeus and Poseidon could advance, a massive wall of fire erupted between them and Atlas. The inferno roared, its flames twisting and crackling like a living entity, casting an eerie golden glow across the battlefield. From the heart of the flames, two figures emerged. Prometheus walked forward first, his ever-present sly smirk playing at his lips. His eyes flickered mischievously, a stark contrast to the weight of the situation. Beside him, his brother, Epimetheus, stood silently, his gaze more hesitant, but his stance unwavering. Zeus and Poseidon halted in their tracks, turning to them. Prometheus stretched his arms out in mock exasperation. Oh, so cool. Look at you two, all fired up for battle. You'd think you'd at least give me a chance to have some fun first. Poseidon huffed. Prometheus. This isn't the time for your jokes. Prometheus chuckled, unfazed. It's always time for my jokes. That's what makes me, me. Zeus narrowed his eyes. Then why are you here? Go take your jokes elsewhere, you sly loach. Prometheus' grin widened. He jabbed a thumb toward Atlas. I'll handle the big guy over there. You two go on ahead. You've got bigger fish to fry, namely, our dear old king. Poseidon hesitated for a moment, glancing at Atlas, whose golden eyes remained locked on Prometheus. But Zeus, without any hesitation, simply nodded. Understood. Don't die. Prometheus placed a hand over his heart, mockingly touched. Ah, look at you, all worried about me. Zeus and Poseidon wasted no more time. In a flash of light, they shot forward, leaping past the burning wall and continuing their march up the stairway to Cronus. As soon as they left, Prometheus turned his full attention to Atlas. So, he greeted, rocking back on his heels. It's been a while, hasn't it, dear brother? Atlas remained seated, his colossal club still stabbed into the ground beside him. His gaze did not waver. Prometheus. His voice was deep and steady, like a mountain speaking. You traitor. The flames around them died down, but the air remained thick with tension. I will give some chance. Leave. Or I will be forced to end you. Atlas stated. Prometheus laughed. Oh? And miss out on this? Come on, Atlas, I can't let you go around messing with the natural order. You know how I feel about that. Atlas exhaled through his nose. The natural order. His fingers tightened around his club. You know better than anyone that there is no natural order. Only power. Prometheus shrugged. Exactly. And right now, the Olympians are the ones with power. So, here I am. Keeping things balanced. Atlas' eyes narrowed. You can't defeat me. Prometheus gave a mock bow. Oh, believe me, I know. Then why appear before me? The ground trembled beneath his foot, his towering form casting an overwhelming shadow over Prometheus. Are you mocking me? Prometheus grinned, rolling his shoulders. Of course not, O brother of mine. It's just that I don't have to beat you. Epimetheus, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. We only need to keep you busy. Atlas tilted his head, then let out a low, amused snort. Keep me busy? Are you too qualified? He rumbled. Prometheus cracked his knuckles. Let's see, why don't we? Atlas laughed before giving a nod. Then, let's find out. You traitorous brother. Atlas gripped his colossal club and swung it with terrifying force. The air screamed as the weapon carved through it, descending upon Prometheus and Epimetheus like an executioner's blade. The ground beneath them fractured and crumbled, the sheer weight of his attack sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. Prometheus barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side as the club obliterated the stone steps where he had stood a moment ago. Dust and debris exploded into the air, but there was no time to recover. Atlas was already moving. Epimetheus, slower than his brother, wasn't as lucky. The impact sent him flying backward, crashing through the ruins of an ancient temple. A deep gash tore across his chest, divine ichor seeping through his wounds. He gritted his teeth and pushed himself up, but his entire body ached from just that one blow. Damn it, Epimetheus coughed. This is ridiculous. Prometheus, leaping away from another devastating strike, let out a breathless chuckle. I did warn you, brother. Atlas is strong. No, you didn't. Epimetheus growled, stumbling back to Prometheus' side. You just dragged me into this. You said we can keep him busy. You liar. I shouldn't have believed you. Atlas charged forward, his movements deceptively fast for someone of his size. Each step cracked the earth beneath him, sending out quakes that threatened to topple the surrounding structures. You two are nothing but insects, he rumbled, his voice as heavy as the mountains he carried in myths yet to be written. I expected more from you, Prometheus. You always did think yourself clever. Prometheus smirked, wiping dust from his brow. Oh, I am clever. That's why I'm still alive. Atlas swung again, the club crashing down with enough force to shatter the entire stairway leading up to Mount Othries. The impact sent shockwaves tearing through the battlefield, causing Olympian and Titan alike to stagger as the ground beneath them buckled. Prometheus and Epimetheus jumped in opposite directions, barely escaping death. But Atlas was relentless. He was no mindless brute swinging blindly, he was precise and methodical. Every strike forced them to move exactly where he wanted them, slowly boxing them in. Epimetheus, panting, wiped sweat and ichor from his brow. Prometheus, tell me you have a plan. Prometheus grinned. Of course I do. Epimetheus narrowed his eyes. Is it actually a plan, or are you just stalling until we die? Prometheus laughed. Can't it be both? Epimetheus groaned. I hate you. Join the club, Prometheus quipped. But despite his usual bravado, Prometheus knew they were in deep trouble. Atlas was overpowering them in every way. The Titan's sheer strength and endurance were unlike anything they had ever faced. They weren't just fighting against a warrior, they were fighting against a force of nature. Atlas didn't slow down. He lifted his club one-handed, its divine weight making the air around it tremble. You cannot defeat me, he stated, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. You are not warriors. You are fools who meddle in things beyond you. He swung again. This time, Prometheus knew they couldn't dodge. Epimetheus, he shouted. His brother didn't hesitate. With a grunt, Epimetheus thrust his hands forward. A barrier of divine energy materialized in front of them, crackling with raw power. It was a desperate defense, but it wasn't enough. The moment Atlas Club slammed into the barrier, the force shattered it instantly. The explosion of energy sent both brothers flying, tumbling across the battlefield like ragdolls. Prometheus hit the ground hard, coughing up ichor. His vision blurred for a moment, his entire body screaming in protest. Epimetheus was worse off. He had taken the brunt of the attack, and now he lay motionless, struggling to breathe. Atlas strode toward them, unbothered. You are done. Prometheus, still dazed, struggled to push himself up. His smirk was gone. Atlas lifted his club for the final strike. The very sky seemed to darken, as if dreading the force of the blow. Prometheus forced himself to move. Even if they were outmatched, even if they were doomed, he wasn't about to die lying down. He summoned fire in his hands, divine flames roaring to life. Atlas brought the club down. Boom! A colossal pillar of fire erupted between them, colliding with Atlas Club and halting its descent. The flames surged wildly, forcing Atlas to step back for the first time. Epimetheus, barely conscious, had lifted his hand, his divine energy feeding the fire. Prometheus grinned seeing him. You're not done yet. Epimetheus, eyes half-lidded, gave him a weak smirk. Of course not. You'd be dead without me. Prometheus laughed. Well, yeah. But that's nothing new. Atlas, watching them, finally exhaled. Persistent insects. His eyes darkened, and for the first time in the fight, his full power surged to the surface. The air itself warped. The battlefield trembled. Prometheus' smirk faded. Atlas was done playing around. You should have run when you had the chance, the Titan said. Now, you die. Prometheus and Epimetheus exchanged a glance. It was at this moment that they knew they fucked up. But still, they stood their ground. Because even if they were outmatched, they weren't going to let Atlas win. At least, not easily. They just have to stall for time until the Olympians are done with their fight. Death to the traitors. Atlas took a step, his club shining in golden light as he prepared to swing. And as Prometheus and Epimetheus prepared to counter, they felt it. A divine power shooting towards Atlas. Atlas barely had time to react before an invisible force slammed into his chest, sending him crashing through stone pillars and ruins. His massive body tore through the battlefield like a meteor, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. The impact caused the ground to tremble, knocking several soldiers off their feet. Prometheus and Epimetheus, still catching their breath from their near defeat, whipped their heads around to see a newcomer. Standing tall, her presence radiating divine authority, was Themis, the Titaness of divine law and order. Her piercing eyes locked onto Atlas as she descended gracefully onto the battlefield, her white robes fluttering despite the chaotic energy swirling around them. Themis. Prometheus breathed, wiping blood from his lips. Epimetheus stared, eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" Themis lifted her hand, and the very air around them hummed with divine power. "The Titan's tyranny ends today," she declared. Her voice, calm yet firm, echoed across the battlefield like a divine decree. Prometheus grinned, his eyes flickered with divine light. "Just in time." "Don't get distracted, Atlas won't fall from something like that," said Themis. And to prove her words, Atlas emerged from the rubble. His armor was cracked, and his brow furrowed in irritation, but he was far from beaten. Dust and debris rolled off his massive frame as he stood up, gripping his club tighter. He rolled his shoulders, the bones cracking loudly, and narrowed his glowing eyes at Themis. "And here comes another traitor," he stated coldly. Themis remained unfazed. Atlas snorted. "It doesn't matter if there are 3 of you. You will all fall just the same." With a roar, he charged once more. Prometheus reacted first, raising both hands as a massive wave of fire erupted from his palms. The inferno roared toward Atlas, but the Titan swung his club with inhuman speed, dispersing the flames as if swatting away smoke. Epimetheus, still recovering, gathered divine energy into his fists and charged alongside Themis. The two flanked Atlas from opposite sides, forcing him to split his attention. Themis, moving with grace and precision, lifted her hand, and golden chains of divine law erupted from the earth, attempting to ensnare Atlas. TCH. Atlas leapt into the air, dodging the chains as they coiled like serpents around the battlefield. He flipped midair and came down with a devastating strike, his club slamming into the ground. Boom! A shockwave rippled outward, tearing apart the land, sending dust and divine debris flying. Prometheus and Epimetheus shielded their eyes, while Themis stood her ground, unwavering. But before Atlas could follow up, crack! A golden barrier of divinity materialized between him and Themis, blocking his strike. The impact sent out a burst of light, forcing Atlas to stagger back. Prometheus saw his chance. Epimetheus, now. Epimetheus, despite his exhaustion, summoned all his strength and slammed his fists together. A burst of raw divine energy exploded outward, colliding into Atlas' exposed side. Atlas grunted, skidding back, but he remained standing. Atlas narrowed his eyes at Themis, realizing she was the biggest threat. With a growl, he lunged toward her, swinging his club with terrifying force. But Themis was prepared. With a mere flick of her wrist, the battlefield shifted. Atlas' feet suddenly sank into the ground, as if the very earth had turned to liquid. His eyes widened. "What?" "Judgment," Themis intoned. "The land itself rejects you. It will drag you down to the depths of the underworld." Atlas roared, forcing his way free, but Prometheus was already on him, flames swirling around his fists. Prometheus punched forward, a blast of divine fire erupting straight at Atlas' chest. Atlas crossed his arms, blocking it, but the force still sent him skidding back. Epimetheus followed up immediately, smashing a boulder-sized chunk of divine energy straight into Atlas' jaw. Crack! The impact sent Atlas staggering, ichor dripping from his mouth. But the Titan refused to fall. The 3 warriors pushed Atlas back, fighting with everything they had. Prometheus danced around him,
launching flames and quick attacks, dodging just before Atlas could counter. Epimetheus fought more recklessly, using brute force to batter Atlas with pure, physical power. Themis remained controlled, using her divine authority to subtly manipulate the battlefield, disrupting Atlas' balance, creating barriers, and binding his movements whenever possible. Despite their efforts, Atlas refused to go down. His strength was relentless, his will unyielding. And yet, for the first time, he was being pushed back. Prometheus, breathing hard, grinned. "Looks like you're not invincible after all, Atlas." Atlas gritted his teeth, wiping the ichor from his lip. "You think you've won," he rumbled. "I am Atlas, the titan of strength and endurance. I will never fall." He had fought for countless ages, borne the weight of the heavens on his shoulders, and crushed warriors beneath his might. Across from him, Prometheus wiped blood from his mouth, his usual cheeky grin replaced with a grim expression. "Oh my, you're ridiculously overpowered," he muttered, shaking his aching hands. "I swear, I feel like we've barely done anything to you." Epimetheus, standing beside him, grimaced. His arms trembled from the sheer force of their battle. "He's not unbeatable," Themis said, her voice resolute. "We have the advantage now. He's tired, and we have him outnumbered." Atlas snorted. "Tired? Outnumbered? You think exhaustion and numbers are enough to stop me?" He slammed his club into the ground, and a seismic wave tore through the battlefield, sending Prometheus and Epimetheus stumbling backward. Themis held her ground, divine barriers forming around her like rippling golden rings, absorbing the force. "I will not be defeated," Atlas declared, lifting his club high. "I will crush you all." With a roar, he swung his weapon, tearing through the battlefield with a devastating arc. Prometheus barely dodged, rolling to the side before launching a spiraling inferno straight at Atlas' face. Boom! Atlas staggered, momentarily blinded. Epimetheus used the opening, rushing in with a burst of divine energy, slamming his fist into Atlas' ribs. Crack! Atlas grunted in pain. Themis followed up immediately, lifting her hand as golden chains of divine law erupted from the ground, wrapping around Atlas' arms and legs, tightening like vipers. "Yield, Atlas," she commanded. "It's over." Atlas growled, muscles bulging as he fought against the divine bindings. "No," he hissed. "I refuse to fall." And then, the air shifted. A terrifying wave of power erupted from Atlas' body, the sheer force of it sending Prometheus, Epimetheus, and Themis flying backward. Boom! Prometheus skidded across the battlefield, coughing violently. Epimetheus crashed into a pile of rubble, groaning. Themis landed on her feet, but even she looked slightly shaken. Atlas rose again, eyes blazing like twin suns. "I will end this." Atlas' voice shook the very air, and suddenly, golden energy began coalescing around him. The heavens rumbled, the battlefield quaked, and then, a colossal beam of energy erupted from his form, pure destructive force hurtling toward the three warriors. Prometheus, Epimetheus, and Themis barely had time to react. "Stop him!" Themis shouted. All three countered at once. Prometheus raised his arms, summoning an all-consuming inferno, fire burning so hot it turned space itself to ash. Epimetheus gathered every last ounce of his power, shaping an unstoppable divine force, condensing it into a single, devastating counterstrike. Themis lifted both hands, calling upon the very foundations of divine law, forming a massive sigil of golden light, a power strong enough to defy even the Titans. Their powers collided with Atlas' blast. The battlefield erupted in an explosion so massive that the entire war seemed to halt for a moment. Light. Fire. Power. The world itself trembled. Atlas roared, pushing forward, unwilling to give in. Prometheus gritted his teeth, his arms burning from the sheer strain. Epimetheus felt his bones crack, but he refused to yield. Themis stood firm, her golden power flickering. The three of them, against Atlas. The clash lasted only moments, but to them, it felt like eternity. And then, Atlas faltered. His power wavered. The combined force of Prometheus' flames, Epimetheus' divine strike, and Themis' divine law finally overwhelmed him. Reag! With a final explosion, Atlas' beam shattered. The blastback sent him hurtling through the air, crashing into the ruins behind him. Silence engulfed the battlefield. A beat later, Prometheus staggered forward, breath ragged. "I think we did it." Epimetheus collapsed to one knee, exhausted. "You think?" Themis walked forward slowly, watching as Atlas lay there, motionless. His massive chest heaved with labored breaths. His armor was shattered, his divine essence flickering. His club lay forgotten beside him. He was defeated. For the first time in his existence, Atlas had fallen. Prometheus wiped sweat from his brow, exhaling shakily. "Finally, about time," he muttered. Themis looked down at Atlas, her expression unreadable. "It is over, Atlas," she said. Atlas grunted, chuckling weakly. "Ha! So this is how it ends." He exhaled heavily, staring up at the sky. "It seems, even I have limits." Prometheus tilted his head. "You don't sound that upset about it." Atlas gave a small, tired smirk. "Perhaps. I always knew it would come to this." Epimetheus, finally catching his breath, leaned back against a broken pillar. "Well," he sighed, "we actually did it. We beat Atlas." He closed his eyes. He knew, once this war was over, he would receive his judgment. And there was no escaping that. Themis remained silent for a moment. Then, she turned toward the battlefield. "This war isn't over yet." Prometheus followed her gaze, eyes narrowing as he observed Mount Othrys. "All that's left is Cronus." Themis and Epimetheus nodded, thinking of the clash that would decide the fate of the cosmos. On the other side, Adonis smirked, rolling his shoulders as he stared down Demeter. "You should have stayed out of this, goddess," he taunted. "Fertility? Harvest? You think that means anything in war? You're nothing compared to your brothers. Nothing but a feeble caretaker." Demeter did not react. Her eyes remained calm, her expression stoic as she tightened her grip on her twin sickles. The blades, each shaped like a crescent moon, shimmered under the dim sky, exuding a strange, paradoxical energy. One blade radiated nourishment, warmth, and growth, capable of granting life to the most lifeless soil. The other blade pulsed with decay, famine, and ruin, capable of draining life itself. Her aura flared, but unlike the oppressive and suffocating darkness of Hades, the raw destructive force of Zeus or the crushing depth of Poseidon, hers was different. It was not a storm nor an earthquake. It was the slow, unstoppable force of nature. The cycle of life itself. Adonis' smirk faltered slightly. Demeter finally spoke, her voice as cool as the autumn wind. "You talk too much." Then, she moved. Adonis barely had time to react. Demeter closed the distance in an instant, her sickle slashing in a deadly arc. He barely dodged, the tip of one blade grazing his armor. And where it touched, his divine metal rusted. Adonis' eyes widened. "What?" But Demeter did not stop. She twisted, her movements fluid as a dancer, her sickle slicing through the air with frightening precision. Golden vines erupted from the ground, seeking Adonis like living snakes. Adonis gritted his teeth, leaping back as he swung his warhammer down, shattering the vines to dust. The ground cracked beneath the force of his blow. But the moment he destroyed them, more vines sprouted in their place, each stronger, thicker, and deadlier than the other. TCH. He jumped back again, narrowly avoiding another slash from her sickles. He felt the pull of her draining blade, a cold sensation creeping up his arm even though it hadn't touched him directly. "Your weapons." Adonis growled, landing on his feet. "They can steal life." Demeter tilted her head slightly. "Not just that, they can give life as well." She swung her left sickle, and the battlefield bloomed. A sea of golden flowers erupted around them, radiating divine energy. Adonis' boots sank into the soft ground as the earth pulsed with life, regenerating Demeter's strength. Adonis scowled. "Enough." He slammed his foot into the ground, and the earth shuddered violently. Massive spikes of rock jutted out from below, destroying the flowers in an instant. But Demeter was already moving. A single leap, and she appeared above him. Adonis' instinct screamed at him, but he was a second too slow. Her sickle sliced across his chest. For the first time in their fight, Adonis let out a pained grunt. Golden energy burst from the wound, draining his divine essence. His muscles felt heavier, slower. She had taken something from him. Adonis staggered back, glaring at the wound. It was already closing, but the effect remained. He could feel his energy slipping. Demeter landed gracefully, her expression still unreadable. "I expected more from someone who stood beside Atlas," she murmured. "I guess Hades' training really did make me so much stronger." Adonis growled. "Don't get arrogant. I am a titan. I will not lose to a mere godling." He roared, unleashing a shockwave that shattered the battlefield. Rivers of molten rock erupted from the ground, incinerating everything in sight. The very air trembled from the force of his divine power. Demeter remained unmoved. She raised a single hand, and in an instant, the volcanic fury halted. The molten earth cooled. The raging flames flickered and died. The battlefield that Adonis had scorched regrew. Greenery sprouted from the ashes. Adonis' breathing became ragged. Demeter vanished and reappeared right in front of him. Adonis barely had time to react before her sickles flashed again. One slashed across his arm, draining him further. The other cut into his side, sending a burst of life energy outward, feeding the battlefield, making it grow even stronger. Adonis roared in frustration, swinging his warhammer wildly. He missed. Demeter was already behind him. And then, she stabbed her sickle into his back. Adonis stiffened. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. He could feel it. His divine power, it was leaving him. His once unbreakable body trembled. His strength, fading. His power, vanishing. Demeter whispered into his ear. "All things wither, Adonis. Even titans." She pulled the sickle out, and Adonis collapsed to his knees. His body felt like stone, heavy and unmovable. He struggled to lift his arms, but they would not respond. The once mighty titan, the warrior who had fought under Cronus for eons, now kneeled before a goddess he had mocked. He looked up at her, struggling to form words. Demeter simply watched silently. Then, she turned away. Adonis' head slumped forward, his vision fading. The last thing he saw was golden flowers blooming around him, life springing from his defeat. And then, darkness. On the other side of the battlefield. Lelantos smirked as he vanished from sight. Hera raised an eyebrow as she crossed her arms, curious about this ability similar to her brother's. The moment his form faded into nothingness, his voice echoed through the battlefield like a whisper in the wind. "What will you do, goddess? You can't fight what you can't see." Hera remained still, her piercing eyes staring forward with an unyielding composure. Her divine mirror was orbiting around her. Lelantos moved swiftly, faster than thought. His dagger materialized for mere instants as he struck at her from behind. "Got you." He grinned in triumph. But before the blade could connect, clang! Hera's floating mirror spun into position, effortlessly blocking the attack. Lelantos clicked his tongue and vanished again. Then, he attacked from the left. Clang! Her mirror blocked the strike. Then from above. Clang! From below. Clang! Lelantos gritted his teeth. No matter where he struck, her divine mirror intercepted him. It almost seems like she's completely invincible. What the hell is up with that mirror? Hera remained completely still. Her arms were still crossed. Her gaze still fixed forward, unbothered. "How long do you plan to hide, Lelantos?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of a queen. Lelantos sneered from the shadows. "Hide? I'm not hiding. I'm hunting." His laughter echoed all around her. "So what if I can't hit you? It's not like you can hit me either. As long as I remain completely invisible, I can always attack you whenever and wherever I want. Like this." He attacked again. Much faster than before. Clang! But just like the other times, the mirror completely blocked every attack. That damn mirror. Lelantos intensified his attacks. But no matter how much force he used. Clang! 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 Every attack was blocked, the mirror remaining completely unscathed. Hera almost let out a yawn. Only her OCD of being a regal queen and a refined lady prevented her from doing so. Lelanto's smirk faltered slightly as he retreated to take a breather. No matter how much he attacks, he couldn't hit her. For now, he should recover and wait until she lowers her guard and strike. But at that moment, Hera tilted her head slightly, and her eyes locked onto him. Or rather, right into his eyes. The moment their gazes met, Lelanto's entire body stiffened, and a chill went down his spine as something impossible had occurred. It is something so absurd he had never once considered it. And so when it happened, he was completely terrified. She could see him. Even in his absolute invisibility, she saw him. Hera smiled, a small, faint, and emotionless smile. Lelanto's heart pounded. He instantly retreated, vanishing even deeper into the void. He was breathing heavily. The invisibility he was so proud of was actually seen through. No, he shook his head, that's not possible. It's just a fluke. I'm sure. But then, a cold whisper brushed against his ear. A fluke, huh? His breath caught. And without any second thoughts, he vanished, not his invisibility, but he disappeared due to his speed. He ran away quite fast. However, before he can safely retreat, shadows erupt from the ground, latching onto his limbs. What? The shadows warped, turning into dark chains that wrapped around him, coiling around his arms and legs, pulling him down. His eyes widened in pure shock. How? Since when do you have authority over darkness? Hera stepped forward, her eyes calm. Even if no one acknowledges it, she said smoothly, I do consider myself the queen of the underworld. And as the goddess of marriage, I can borrow the authority of my king, who is Hades. After all, husband and wife share everything together. She and Hades weren't married yet, they weren't even in a relationship. But she considers him her husband, and that is more than enough for her authority to take effect. As the goddess of marriage, she can borrow whatever her husband has, be it his authority or power. Of course, this domain of hers is limited only to one person. Her domain over marriage would not allow her to trample over the beauty of marriage by being unfaithful. So for the rest of her life, she is bound to Hades. Lelanto struggled against the chains, but they were infused with the very essence of the underworld itself. And just then, Hera's mirror turned, facing him directly. The smooth, polished surface shimmered. Let me tell you, Hera started, my mirror doesn't block attacks. It seals whatever I want inside it, and I can release whatever is sealed inside back to the outside world. As she said that, the mirror glowed and, before Lelanto's shocked and terrified look, released every single one of his sealed attacks. All at once. A storm of divine energy erupted from the mirror, unleashing the full force of every dagger strike, every invisible slash, and every sneak attack he had thrown. Lelanto screamed. The very attacks he had once aimed at her now struck him instead. His own power turned against him. His divine body was being torn and ripped to shreds, and yet, the attack showed no sign of stopping. Lelanto was sure that his attacks weren't this many. Oh, I forgot to mention. I can reseal those attacks and release them back. Basically, as long as I have divine power left, this attack will rain on you for eternity. Just like that, Lelanto suffered pain and torment like nothing he had ever experienced before. And when the divine storm finally faded, Lelanto was now nothing more than a pile of ground divine meat. His once proud invisibility rendered useless. His once unmatched stealth crushed. His life gone. Hera walked past him, not even sparing his grounded corpse another glance. She had no need for words. Her actions had spoken loud enough. The Temple of Cronus loomed before Hades, its mere presence warping reality itself. Hades strode forward, the weight of the underworld following in his wake. The air around the Temple of Cronus was thick with distortion, rippling as if time itself was rejecting his presence. The temple was a realm outside of time, a place where moments stretched into eternity or vanished in an instant. For any lesser god, simply existing here would be a death sentence. But Hades was unmoved. The swirling vortex of chaotic time parted before him, unable to touch him. His footsteps echoed in defiance, each step dragging reality back into order. He continued forward until he arrived at a massive hall. At the far end, seated upon a towering throne carved from the bones of forgotten ages, was Cronus. The Titan King sat in unmoving silence, his gaze like an abyss. His scythe rested at his side, its blade pulsing with the power to sever existence itself. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They merely locked eyes, observing the powerful being in front of them. Then, Cronus smiled. "Welcome, my son." Hades didn't return the greeting. Instead, he raised his gaze slightly, staring at Cronus seated above him. His expression darkened. "Come down," he said, his voice carrying an edge of command. "I don't like it when people stand above me." Cronus chuckled. "As arrogant as I expected," he mused, but he did as requested. The Titan King stood, descending from his throne, each step slow and deliberate. The hall trembled. The moment Cronus reached the final step, standing level with Hades, the god of the underworld spoke again. "Now speak, Titan." Cronus tilted his head, an amused glint in his ageless eyes. "I have always found you different from your brothers, Hades. Not only because of your strength, but also your motivation." He gestured vaguely to the temple around them. "You already have your own domain, your own kingdom. The underworld belongs to you. You do not need to fight for more. So why are you here?" His gaze narrowed. "Do you seek to be the king of the cosmos?" Hades let the question hang in the air for a moment before answering. "I seek only one thing. It's nothing grand, really." His aura darkened, shadows stretching unnaturally from his form. "I simply want to destroy anyone who believes they can stand above me." Cronus observed him carefully. A simple motivation, but unnecessary. "If that is all you desire, then why not leave? I will not interfere with your underworld." Hades shook his head. "I do not find you worthy to sit on that throne, so I will pull you down, even if you refuse to interfere with my domain." Cronus' expression remained calm, but a faint flicker of amusement touched his lips. "How arrogant." His voice was smooth, like a blade against silk. "You speak as if the ruler of the cosmos must first receive your approval." Hades' eyes burned with cold authority. "It is only natural." His tone was absolute. "Because I am the most superior." For the first time, Cronus' smile faded. Silence fell between them, a silence heavier than the weight of time itself. Then, Cronus tightened his grip on his scythe. "Then come, Hades." A pulse of time energy erupted from Cronus' body, distorting reality. "Let us see if you can prove your superiority." "There is nothing to prove." Hades took a step forward. "I do not seek nor require your approval. But come, I will let you have a taste of my power." "Very well." The moment Cronus moved, the Temple of Time shook. He swung his scythe, its blade humming with the power to sever existence itself. Hades raised his hand, and the underworld answered. A great black barrier erupted before him, formed from the very fabric of the afterlife. Cronus' scythe struck it, and the barrier cracked, splitting apart like glass, but it had done its job. Hades had already moved. In an instant, he appeared behind Cronus, his hand wreathed in divine power. "I expected more." He swung his fist, but Cronus twisted just in time. The Titan vanished in a blur of movement, appearing above Hades, his scythe slashing downward. A tear in space formed, stretching from the heavens to the depths of Tartarus. Hades, however, did not move. He raised his hands, and the shadows surged. Dark tendrils shot from the abyss, wrapping around Cronus' scythe and dragging it off course. In the same breath, Hades raised his palm, and a black spear of concentrated death formed. He hurled it. Cronus barely twisted in time, but the spear still grazed his shoulder, and time itself warped where it passed. "You are really strong, Hades," Cronus said, brushing his hand over the wound. "Stronger than I anticipated." He met Hades' eyes, and for the first time, a shadow of uncertainty passed over the Titan's face. Can he really beat him? Hades hummed. "Have you only realized it now?" "TCH, Cronus clicked his tongue. "Guess I have no choice. I will end you here, even if I have to swallow my pride." The Titan King slammed his scythe to the ground, and a terrible tremor shook the world. The Temple of Time, already distorted, began to crack apart. And then, a figure emerged. Chains, countless and ancient, wrapped around his colossal body, pinning him to the fabric of reality itself. His presence was so vast that it felt like the sky itself had gained form. The very air froze, heavy with overwhelming power. Hades narrowed his eyes. His domain over the primordial sky stirred, reacting to the figure's presence. Uranus. Only that being can cause such a reaction to his domain. Cronus turned to face him, looking annoyed and angry. Father. Cronus' voice contained seething hatred, as if the very act of calling him was incredibly painful. As we have agreed, I will do as I have sworn to you if you defeat an enemy for me. He pointed his scythe at Hades. That enemy is there. Kill him, and I will grant you what we have agreed on. The bound figure, Uranus, said nothing at first. Then, he turned his gaze toward Hades. His eyes were like the endless cosmos. He studied the god of the underworld, his expression unreadable. Then, he spoke. I can feel my domain within you. His voice was like the wind that had existed before time. Did Gaia give it to you? Hades, ever composed, gave a single nod. She did. Uranus hummed. The chains binding him groaned, and then, they loosened. Piece by piece, they unraveled, until he stood, free. Cronus stepped forward, triumphant. Now, Father, I know. Uranus cut him off, his eyes not leaving Hades. Then, I would like to see if you are worthy of it. Hades grinned. Why do you people like to say things like that as if I needed your approval? You're the one who needs to prove yourself to me. Let me see if you are worthy of me using that domain. Uranus smiled. Then, observe if I'm worthy or not. The moment Uranus moved, the very air screamed. A hand, vast and cosmic, surged toward Hades. It was not merely flesh but the manifestation of the boundless sky itself. Hades' eyes narrowed. With a flick of his wrist, the world beneath them shattered. The earth itself split open, revealing an endless abyss, the domain of the dead. From that abyss, countless skeletal arms, forged from divine essence, erupted forward, grasping for Uranus' outstretched hand. But the sky could not be bound. The arms of the underworld barely slowed Uranus as he tore through them, his movements faster than thought. Hades sidestepped as the force of Uranus' fist obliterated the space where he stood. A massive rupture split through existence. Everything was distorted, as though reality itself had been peeled open like torn cloth. Hades did not hesitate. The void behind him churned, and then, in a burst of godly might, he stepped through it. He emerged above Uranus, his palm outstretched. The sky darkened, and a massive black storm of darkness and destruction, forged from the underworld itself, rained down upon Uranus. But the primordial sky only smiled. You seek to drag me down? With a single exhale, Uranus dispersed the storm, the entire sky bending to his will. Hades, however, had already anticipated this. He appeared behind Uranus in an instant. His voice was low as he said, "No. I'm merely testing how much you can withstand." Then, he struck. A punch laced with the power of the underworld crashed into Uranus' back. And for the first time, the sky staggered. Meanwhile, as Uranus and Hades battled, Cronus wanted to interfere, intending to end Hades at this moment. However, a shadow twisted into existence before him, stopping him in his tracks. Hecate stood there, her form wrapped in shifting purple mist. "I believe you were going somewhere," she mused, her voice eerily calm. Cronus' eyes flashed. "You intend to stop me?" Hecate tilted her head. "No. I intend to erase you." With a wave of her hand, the space around Cronus distorted. Countless purple chains, laced with forbidden magic, erupted from the ground. They lunged for Cronus, attempting to bind him, but the Titan King reacted instantly. His scythe lashed out, slashing through them with absolute precision. A single swing, and the entire spell was undone. Hecate, however, did not seem concerned. She lifted her hand, and suddenly, the chains that had been severed reformed behind Cronus. And then, they struck. They coiled around his arms, his legs, and his torso, binding him midair. Cronus let out a small scoff. "Is this all?" Then, time reversed. In the blink of an eye, the chains unraveled, undoing themselves as if they had never existed. Hecate furrowed her brows. Cronus grinned.
You forget who I am, witch. With that, he attacked. His scythe swung, faster than the concept of speed itself. But Hecate was gone. No, she had never been there in the first place. Her form flickered, revealing that she had only been an illusion. Cronus' eyes widened. And then, from the shadows behind him, Hecate whispered into his ear. You forget who I am, Titan. With that, she struck. A blast of pure chaotic magic erupted, sending Cronus crashing through the walls of his own temple. However, as if the world itself rejected such an outcome, everything reverted back. From the shadows behind him, Hecate whispered into his ear. You forgot who what? Hecate's eyes widened slightly. Cronus smirked as he turned around and brought his scythe down, intending to cut her in half. Hecate, however, reacted quickly and retreated. But it was too late. A deep and long wound ran from her right shoulder to her stomach, golden ichor gushing out like a waterfall. Cronus rested his scythe over his shoulder. Come on, witch. Make this more interesting for me. Hecate narrowed her eyes. This fight is really going to be troublesome. The ruins of the temple trembled as Hecate's eyes narrowed at Cronus. A dark purple aura flared up from her body, forming into a thick mist as she prepared to launch an attack. She lifted her hand, and the mist swirled, glowing with immense destructive energy. Without a word, she unleashed it. A barrage of destruction magic, raw, unfiltered, and absolute, rained down upon Cronus. Each blast was powerful enough to erase existence itself, the very fabric of reality screaming as it twisted under the force of her magic. But Cronus? He merely waved his scythe. Time itself unraveled. Before the attacks could even reach him, they ceased to exist, as if they had never been cast in the first place. Cronus exhaled, unimpressed. Your power, magic was it? It is indeed formidable, but do you not understand? His eyes gleamed. I wield time itself. Then, he swung his scythe again. The world froze. The entire battlefield stilled, everything locked in a single moment of time. Hecate was frozen in place. Cronus stepped forward, studying her. It is over. His voice was calm, almost disappointed. No matter how powerful you are still bound by the laws of time. Even gods cannot move beyond it. But then, a crack formed in the stillness. A faint glow pulsated from Hecate's body. And then, the world shattered. Time collapsed. Cronus' eyes widened in shock as the frozen world around them broke apart like fragile glass. And there stood Hecate, breathing heavily. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, but she remained standing, her aura still flaring with power. Cronus was silent for a moment. Then, he smiled. Interesting. He stepped forward, eyes gleaming with curiosity. How did you do it? He asked. How did you escape my time lock? Hecate, still panting, simply glared at him. She did not answer. Cronus chuckled. Ah, I see. A trick you do not wish to share? No matter, I'll figure it out soon enough. He lifted his scythe once more. Let us continue, Witch of the Crossroads. As he was about to attack, his eyes narrowed as he felt two oppressive presences arriving. Then, with a roar of thunder, Zeus came down from the heavens, lightning coiled around his body. And with a shake of the earth, Poseidon emerged from the ground, bringing forth water that was released from below. They stood in front of Hecate, who was still showing signs of exhaustion. They stared straight at Cronus' eyes. The sky crackled with lightning. The earth rumbled as if the sea itself were roaring beneath the ground. Never thought I'd see the day you'd look so defeated. Zeus joked, chuckling at Hecate. Guess Cronus was too much for you, huh? Poseidon joined in. The two of them have been insulted and looked down on by Hecate before. They couldn't even argue because Hecate was powerful and had never been defeated, but now, they can have a little payback. Shut it. Hecate took a deep breath as her body finally recovered. Cronus let out an annoyed grunt, rolling his shoulders. You two should have stayed where you were, he muttered. No matter. I'll end you all at the same time. He took a step forward, his mere presence distorting time itself. Then, right before their eyes, he vanished. With a speed faster than even time, he was already in front of them. And, with a blur of movement,
a deadly arc of his scythe flashed toward them. Zeus's and Poseidon's instincts screamed as they moved to block. Hecate also erupted layers upon layers of defensive magic, intending to stop the attack. But pain erupted across Zeus's and Poseidon's bodies before they could even react. Golden ichor sprayed into the air. Zeus clutched his side, and Poseidon staggered back, a deep gash running across his chest. Hecate's eyes widened in horror. "Damn it," she cursed, hands glowing with magic as she rushed to heal them. Cronus smirked. "Futile." His voice was casual, almost mocking. "That was an attack I sent to the past. The act of swinging is merely a formality. I have already cut you down before I even attack you." Zeus gritted his teeth. "TCH, this bastard." Poseidon wiped the blood from his mouth, eyes cold. "Annoying ability." Hecate finished healing them, though sweat dripped from her forehead. "Be careful," she warned. "We don't know how much control he has over his domain." Zeus and Poseidon exchanged glances and nodded at each other. A sudden boom of energy erupted as they unleashed their divine weapons. Zeus's lightning bolt crackled with golden arcs of destruction. Poseidon's trident gleamed with the might of the endless ocean. Cronus chuckled. "Come, then." He spread his arms. "Show me your worth." Zeus struck first. A pillar of lightning erupted from his hand, tearing through the air like the judgment of the heavens. At the same time, Poseidon thrust his trident forward, summoning colossal waves that rose like living titans, aiming to swallow Cronus whole. Boom! The battlefield shattered. Mount Othrys quaked, the very foundations of the Titan's stronghold trembling beneath the force of the attack. But Cronus merely smiled. With a single step, he vanished. In an instant, he was behind them. His scythe swung. Zeus barely twisted in time to raise his lightning bolt, blocking the attack, but the force sent him crashing through mountains. Poseidon reacted instantly, spinning his trident in a defensive arc, creating a barrier of divine water. Cronus' scythe cut through it effortlessly. A thin line of gold appeared on Poseidon's cheek before the pain even registered. Hecate raised her hands, chanting a powerful spell. Endless streams of shadow hands emerged from the abyss, trying to pull the Titan King into the depths of the underworld. But Cronus merely lifted a finger. The hands decayed. Time itself had been reversed, returning them to their unformed state. Cronus turned to her. Impressive, but futile. Hecate did not falter. "We'll see about that." Zeus returned with a roar, flying through the air, his entire body wreathed in thunder. "Die!" A titanic lightning bolt descended. The very sky tore apart from the force. Cronus raised his hand and caught the lightning bolt with his bare fingers. Time froze around him, the golden arcs of divine destruction held in place like a painting. Then, with a clench of his fist, he shattered it. The entire world seemed to crack as Zeus' attack was unmade. Poseidon attacked next, using the sea itself as a weapon. Torrential waves rose from nowhere, forming into serpentine dragons of water, their maws snapping at Cronus with the force of an ocean storm. But Cronus simply laughed. With a flick of his scythe, time unraveled the waves, returning them to harmless mist before they even reached him. Zeus and Poseidon panted, sweat dripping from their foreheads. This was absurd. Hecate clenched her fists. "Give me some time, I have a spell that might work on him." Zeus wiped blood from his lips. "TCH, fine. How long do you need?" "As much as you can give." Poseidon nodded. "Leave it to us." Zeus and Poseidon rushed towards Cronus. Zeus summoned the wrath of the heavens, a lightning so intense it could incinerate stars. Poseidon called forth the roar of the abyss, a tidal force capable of drowning entire realms. The battlefield exploded. The sheer force of the attack split the land apart, entire mountains disintegrating from the sheer power unleashed. For a moment, it seemed like even Cronus could not withstand it. But then, a slow, deep chuckle echoed through the destruction. Cronus stepped out of the ruined landscape. Unscathed. His smirk widened. Not bad. Then, with a flick of his scythe, the world reversed. Everything they had just done, the destruction, the attacks, all of it was undone. Zeus and Poseidon staggered, eyes widening in horror. What? Zeus gasped.
Poseidon clenched his fists. Damn it. He reset everything. Cronus let out a slow, amused breath. Do you understand now? I am inevitable. He spun his scythe once, and the sound of it alone made the world itself tremble. Poseidon and Zeus gritted their teeth, feeling hopelessness and despair. They can't think of a way to win against him. It is time. Just then, HADES stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with ancient power as her voice rang out in a chilling incantation. Let me show you the beginning. The world before there is. The air twisted. The very fabric of existence screamed as an ancient force stirred. A massive rift tore open before her, revealing something beyond comprehension. A hellish world, one that had existed before time itself had meaning. A place of pure destruction and entropy. A land where the planet had been naught but searing lava, endless oceans of fire, and storms of toxic gas. Where the atmosphere was so dense and thick with primordial chaos that even gods would perish upon setting foot. It was the planet's form before Genesis. A time before the earth, before the sky, before even the titans themselves. And HADES unleashed it. A flood of crimson fire, molten storms, and abyssal gases surged forward like the breath of a forgotten god. The very air ignited, space warped and burned, and the battlefield itself began to erode from existence. Cronus' eyes narrowed. He could feel it. This was not an attack bound by time. It was something beyond his domain. Something from a world where even his authority did not exist. For the first time, his smirk faltered. Humph. He gripped his scythe tighter. The inferno of precreation surged toward him, hungry, consuming. But Cronus did not step back. Instead, he raised his scythe high and swung. A single golden arc of power erupted from the blade, but instead of cutting the flames, instead of undoing the spell, he tried to cut the concept itself. To sever this hell from reality. The world trembled. For a moment, time and space warped violently. The battlefield erupted into chaos, as if reality itself was trying to decide what should exist. But the hell of precreation was not so easily cut. The flames surged, twisting around his attack, pressing closer, threatening to consume even Cronus. His expression darkened. I see. So this is the power of the Witch of the Crossroads. With those words, the hell swallowed him.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.